It all begins on a rainy night on a brightly lit bridge in the city. The protagonist Rudel holds a grim knife while crying and remembering that day. With no other options, he points the blade directly at a girl in the darkness. Deeply shaken, he confesses that this was the worst choice of his life and apologizes. But the truth is that none of this should have happened this way. At this point, the scene changes to a classroom where the boy is sleeping peacefully at his desk. His childhood friend asks him to wake up and complains that he's asleep again. Waking up very slowly, he raises his head, still somewhat groggy from sleep. Rakuna announces that the next class will be in another room while holding her notebooks. Walking down the hallway, she asks if he spent the whole night playing again. The protagonist thinks about how she has always taken care of him for a long time. A memory surfaces showing the two of them as children in a dark and dirty alley. At that time, the little girl reached out her hand with a kind look to help him. With that, he reminds her that she saved him when he was a complete disaster. Back in the present, the two continue walking together through the school hallways. Stopping near the window, the girl points outside and gets her friend's attention. Is completely amazed by the beautiful sight of the illuminated city. Observing the rainbow, he reflects that he only has this peaceful life thanks to it. On the other hand, the boy knows that there is a very different reality hidden away. On the hidden side of this piece, a dark alley harbors several strange creatures. There are numerous aberrations that threaten the daily lives of normal people. As night falls, the protagonist prepares to act in the dark realm. Walking alone down a deserted street, he is soon surrounded by the creatures. Standing before the monsters, he reveals that his real name is not Rudo. They begin to roar fiercely, ready to attack the boy. Releasing a dark aura, he claims that his real name is Salt and that he is a doppelganger. Using his power to manipulate shadows freely, he slices through enemies around him. One of the monsters tries to escape, but he warns that the creature will not get away. With a swift movement, the shadow attack cuts the aberration in half. Taking advantage of the opening, Salt finishes the fight by landing a fatal blow on the monster. After the fight, the protagonist notices strange movement nearby. He is surprised to notice that another enemy was about to attack. Suddenly, a girl jumps from the top of a building wielding a sharp blade. Without giving the creature a chance, she lands a precise blow on the flying monster. As soon as she lands stylishly, Salt recognizes the girl and calls out to Hakwa. He thanks her for the help, but she warns the young man not to let his guard down at any time. The boy explains that Hakwa is part of a mysterious organization. Walking together, she remarks that the two of them work much better fighting as a team. Sometimes they would spend time sitting together, while she listened to his problems. Because she also fought every day, the warrior was always there to help him when he needed it. Gathering courage, Hakwa invites his friend to go out to eat sometime. Excited by the idea, Salt happily agrees that it sounds really cool. As they continue walking down the alley, the two begin to decide what they are going to eat. The protagonist reflects on how important Hakwa has become in his journey. At the same time, he also thinks about his unbreakable bond with the kind Rakuna. Observing the flowering trees at night, he concludes that the two are precious people. However, a heavy worry takes hold of the young man's thoughts. Looking at the city from above, he senses that something dark is approaching everyone. A mysterious man with glasses appears, plotting the worst possible future. One day, a sinister energy struck the two girls without any prior warning. Unfortunately, both were marked by something known as the curse of death. Without swift intervention, the friends would die, and there was only one way to save them. The terrible solution required that one of the girls be killed on that rainy night. Forced to make this impossible decision, Salt clutches his weapon, utterly shaken. With no way to escape this cruel fate, he finds the courage to do what he needs to do. The protagonist suffers silently, feeling unbearable pain in his chest because of the situation. Before the fatal blow, the chosen girl exudes calm and expresses gratitude for everything. Blood splatters across the scene as he declares himself the worst person in the world. In the daily life of the big city, most people live without knowing the truth. Far from human eyes, bizarre creatures inhabit the filthy alleys of this world. Non-human entities roam freely through the streets, confirming the existence of aberrations. In the past, young Salt roamed alone through the most dangerous corners of the underworld. He lived in the lost area City of Freaks, completely isolated from society. The place was complete chaos, full of creatures wandering aimlessly. Holding his own stomach, the little boy feels a terrible hunger and tries to survive. In the middle of the trash, he finds a plate with leftover food thrown away. The boy is very excited to see that he has finally found something to eat. Quickly, he grabs the dirty tray as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. But suddenly, he is startled by a noise coming from right above. A pile of garbage bags falls directly onto the head of the poor, hungry boy. Two terrifying aberrations stare at the boy from above, calling him a sewer rat. Covered in dirt, Salt listens to the big guys mocking his awful smell. The food he had found ended up completely destroyed and mixed up on the floor. One of the monsters grabs the boy by the collar and orders him to hunt a human to feed on. Unable to defend himself, the boy can only hear the bully's malicious laughter. One of the monsters shouts that the boy is just a useless doppelganger, capable only of cursing anyone who has the same face as him. Lacking any real skill, Little Salt considers himself a true heretic and a failure even among freaks. Then he takes a hard punch to the face and groans in pain, unable to react. Another creature lands a heavy blow on the boy while laughing at the miserable situation. Thus, the poor boy ends up being beaten by a group of monsters in a dark alley. Suddenly, a far more menacing aberration appears, claiming that territory belongs to him, frightening the bullies. Using a dark power, the owner of the territory attacks and slices up the aggressors without the slightest mercy. Taking advantage of the confusion, the boy lies on the ground breathing deeply and trying to recover from the fright. Desperate for his life, he gets up and starts running as fast as he can to get away from there. As he flees through the streets, he remembers that his only skill as a doppelganger is cursing people. When he encounters his original human counterpart, that human ends up cursed and dies, and he watches the real Ryudo lying on the ground. Even if there is no intention to kill, the curse happens anyway, making it a completely tragic power. However, the shadowy monster from before swiftly catches up to the protagonist and prepares a merciless attack from behind. He senses the approach and looks back in terror as the lethal blow strikes him squarely. Feeling unbearable pain throughout his body, the boy screams desperately, begging the creature to stop. Suffering from the brutal attack, the young doppelganger screams in agony as he is torn apart. Just as he was about to lose his life, he fell to the ground illuminated by a mysterious light. At that moment, soft footsteps began to echo through the silent alley, drawing closer to him. An unknown little girl appears against the light and calls the boy by the name Ryuto. Quite worried, the girl asks if it's really him lying there. Standing in front of the injured boy, he only reacts confused, wanting to know who she is. The girl comments that she thought she would never see him again, as they said he had disappeared in the river, questioning if he didn't remember anything. Noticing the boy's vacant stare, she simply accepts the situation with a gentle expression. In truth, he simply didn't know anything about it, but the girl already bends down to comfort him. Extending her hand with great affection, she states that she is very happy that he is safe after so long. He hesitates, overwhelmed by the guilt of not being the real Ryuto, only a beggar usurping someone else's life. The shrill alarm cuts through the silence of the memory, signaling that a new day has just begun. Startled awake, the young man sits up in bed, gasping, relieved that it was only a nightmare. Feeling more composed, he heads to the kitchen, where he finds his family gathered for breakfast. While chewing his toast, he reflects on how 3 years have passed since that memorable day. As he crosses the gate, he bids farewell to his family and heads towards his school. Walking along the public sidewalk, he lets out a long yawn, trying to shake off his morning sleepiness. Contemplating the green scenery by the river, he reflects on the unwavering peace of that city. Suddenly, someone lightly touches the back of your neck, unexpectedly drawing your attention. Raccoona appears radiant, saying good morning, and he immediately recognizes the voice of his close friend. She accompanies the boy along the way, maintaining affectionate closeness and a welcoming demeanor. As they walk, the girl remembers that summer vacation starts tomorrow and probes his plans. Looking at the ground as he walked, the protagonist wished that this calm could last forever. She suggests they go out together to have fun, leaving the boy unsure how to react. This awakens memories of the day he took the place of the real Ryudo 3 years ago. A flashback shows the girl reaching out to rescue him from that filthy alley. After rescuing him, she led Little Salt safely inside her home. Opening the door gently, she introduced the helpless boy to this new environment. Then, a woman embraced him, weeping, convinced that he was her returned son. Braced by that family affection, he was finally able to enjoy a warm and proper meal. Thinking about the past, he admits to himself that he's been living a profound lie ever since. Currently, he hesitates to reveal the truth, fearing to destroy Rakuna's happiness. Accepting the burden, he concludes that maintaining Rito's mask preserves everyone's peace. She questions him about the summer festival, and he avoids talking about his desire to never be homeless again. He believed his life would remain stable, while his friend timidly awaited his response. But the calm is broken when an anomalous structure emerges from the ground, turning into a nightmare. A violent purple burst of radiation explodes in the middle of the road, terrifying all nearby pedestrians. The young man's eyes widen, paralyzed by that bizarre and sudden apparition. A colossal portal, shaped like a torii, tears through the sky, leaving the crowd in a state of utter shock. Without understanding the danger, Raccoona inquires, perplexed, about the origin of that strange light. From the shadows of the portal, terrifying monsters emerge and begin to mercilessly attack civilians. Panic grips the avenue, with screams of horror echoing as people try to flee. Hideous creatures emerge from nowhere, sowing total chaos in the middle of the central square. The chaos, a flying skeletal being emerges swiftly from the dimensional rift. The aerial aberration focuses on its target and charges towards the defenseless students who were there. Faced with the horror of the scene, Raccoona remains paralyzed, incapable of any reaction. Team purely on reflex, the protagonist grips her hand with extreme firmness. Shouting at the top of his lungs, he orders her to run as the skeleton advances toward them. The monster's immense claw nearly crushed them both against the street pavement. The destructive attack hits the ground right behind, raising a dense cloud of dust and debris. In every corner, wild beastmaster people, creating a scene of carnage. The girl runs with all her might, struggling to keep up with the frantic pace of the escape. The boy analyzes the situation in shock, having never seen such aberrations before. In the middle of the sprint, Raccoona trips and falls, forcing the young man to stop to help her. Taking advantage of her vulnerability, an arachnid monster leaps out, ready for the deadly strike. The creature opens its jaws wide, displaying little fangs for the final blow. Lying on the cold ground, the girl stares at the beast, sensing the inevitable approach of the end. But the protagonist intervenes, repelling the monster with a sudden, dark power. As the price of his heroism, sharp claws pierce his chest, causing blood to gush out. Upon seeing his friend impaled before him, Raccoona lets out a desperate cry of shock. The monster tears apart Ryudo's back, who lets out a cry of agonizing pain. Raccoona watches that brutal scene completely horrified, bathed in tears. Even under excruciating pain, the boy struggles to remain conscious and steady. Memories of her kindness motivate him to vow that, this time, he will protect her. Channeling dark energy, the protagonist unleashes a powerful attack that drives the beast away. The violent impact throws the monster far away, causing severe damage to the creature. Feeling the weight of the wound, he presses his bleeding shoulder, enduring the pain. He quickly warns that this is their chance to escape and pulls the girl with him. As they escape, she worries about the bleeding, but he insists he can handle it. Raccoona insists that his condition is serious and suggests they hide in a nearby building. Hidden in an alley, they silently watch a bizarre creature pass by on the street ahead. The long-haired monster walks slowly, tracking victims in the darkness. Now in an isolated compartment, Ryudo sits down exhausted, promising to tend to his wound himself. Seeing the situation worsen, the friend becomes desperate, unable to stop the bleeding. Determined to be helpful, she searches the surroundings for any emergency supplies. Just as she is about to walk away, the boy asks her to wait a moment. Feeling guilty about the chaos, he apologizes for causing so many complications. The girl tries to console him, reminding him that they had survived this far because of his bravery. She begs him not to worry, and to try to maintain the necessary serenity. Suddenly, the wall of the place explodes, sending concrete debris flying everywhere. He turns around startled, trying to understand the origin of that sudden attack. Desperate at the devastation, he calls out Raccoona's name with all his might. That long-haired monster invades the refuge, clearly focused on eliminating the human. The aberration advances menacingly through the dark hall, completely ignoring the protagonist. Among the wreckage from the impact, the girl is found lying on the ground, seriously injured. Realizing the danger to his friend, Ryudo desperately runs to her rescue. However, the beast is too agile and delivers a devastating blow that sends the boy flying. The brutal impact throws the young man against the tables, causing him to collide with extreme force. Feeling intense pain, he tries to stand up while processing what happened. The monster lifts the girl into the air, declaring that it will fulfill its death pact. Lying on the ground, the protagonist reaches out his hand in a vain effort to save her. Weakened, the friend murmurs his name one last time in a trembling voice. Paralyzed by terror, unable to muster any reaction. Transmitting peace despite the bloodshed, she only asks that it continue to exist. That goodbye plunges the boy into a deep state of psychological trauma. In a cruel instant, the beast crushes the girl, splattering blood all over the place. The monster lets out a triumphant roar as it celebrates the death of its defenseless prey. Completely emotionally devastated, the boy kneels, pleading for his protector. A sweet memory, where she said everything would be all right, floods her troubled mind. The monster discards the lifeless body, while he continues to call out to her in disbelief. He recalls Raccoona's contagious joy, trying to comfort him in the past. At that moment, the bloodied body collided violently against the cold floor. The agony of loss awakens an uncontrollable hatred, causing his eyes to emit a sinister gleam. A dark and oppressive aura emanates from his body, shattering the ground around him. Overcome by visceral rage, he screams that he will never forgive such cruelty. Enveloped in murderous shadows, the young man vows to eliminate the abomination right there. In response, the creature shows utter disdain, underestimating the boy's potential. Without hesitation, the protagonist takes off at superhuman speed, tearing through the air. With his mind consumed by the thirst for revenge, he reaffirms his vow of annihilation. The monster raises its blood-stained hand, preparing for the final showdown. The creature maintains an air of superiority, convinced that it holds the upper hand in combat. However, focuses his dark essence with total precision on his opponent. With a swift movement, he unleashes an ascending shadow strike of colossal proportions. The unexpected speed of the attack leaves the beast stunned, with no room for defense. Enraged, the monster yells at the boy and tries to retaliate with a devastating punch. The young man dodges the fatal blow with dizzying speed, becoming a mere blur. The creature's fist slams against the ground, leaving a trail of destruction across the scene. The monster searches the surroundings, confused about the whereabouts of its adversary. Hidden from view, the protagonist emerges swiftly, climbing the beast's gigantic arm. When the monster reacts, it is already positioned high up, ready for the final blow. Summoning monumental dark claws, he mocks the laughter the beast had uttered before. Extending his palm, he channels all his hatred into a single point of impact. Pillars of darkness crash down upon the enemy, crushing him mercilessly. Devoured by shadows, the creature howls in pain as it suffers unimaginable damage. The monster falls to its knees, struggling to endure the agony of the onslaught. Without allowing a truce, the protagonist throws himself from the heights to end the battle. Overcome by resentment, he concentrates all his vigor on the final blow. The boy cuts the enemy in half, ending that immediate threat. The brutal blow disintegrates the creature, splattering blood all around. The monster's remains collapse, scattering across the asphalt of the road. Exhausted, the boy observes his hands, which still emit an energized glow. He reflects, confused on the nature of that bizarre energy that manifested. However, as his adrenaline subsides, he desperately recalls his friend's critical condition. Walking among the rubble, he approaches the lifeless body lying in the hall. Faced with the harsh reality, he confronts the young woman, feeling devastated by the loss. Her voice echoed in his mind, asking if he remembered the summer festival. Affectionately calling him Rudo, she maintained a serene expression in the face of the end. In tears, the young man embraces her lifeless body, in the middle of that devastated room. The pool of blood growing on the floor confirms that her life has already ebbed away. Overcome with guilt, he whispers his partner's name in a choked voice. He breaks down in sobs, lamenting that he did not keep his promise to protect her. Caressing her face, he acknowledges that his survival depended on her. He confesses, through tears, that he maintained a continuous charade the entire time. Frustrated, he clenches his radiant fist, cursing his own stupidity. Outside, the city continues to be a scene of chaos and horrors perpetrated by monsters. Responding to the roar of a beast, he vows that he will no longer tolerate such barbarity. Unleashing his energy, he points the finger at those responsible for ruining his peace. Getting up, the protagonist blames the monsters for the tragedy he and Raccoon experienced. Before moving on, he asks his fallen friend to wait briefly for his return. With a look filled with hatred, he vows to exterminate every single one of those invaders. Focused, Rito concludes that he must first assess the situation on the outside streets. A sharp cry of despair interrupts his thoughts, drawing his attention. A blindfolded young woman is captured by the tentacles of a skeletal monster. The protagonist reacts instantly upon realizing the danger posed by the stranger. The girl groans in pain, trying to break free from the creature's dark bonds. Without hesitation, he activates his violent powers to intervene promptly. In a swift movement, he slices through the dark tentacles that held the victim. Thanks to the opening, the girl breaks free from her restraints and begins to collapse. Quickly, Rito catches her in his arms before she crashes into the pavement. She appears dazed, trying to identify who saved her from that attack. He asks about her condition, and she stammers in response, still in shock. Safe, she expresses gratitude for being rescued from the skeletons. When she looked at his face, she hesitated, as if she noticed something familiar about the young man. A tense silence hangs between the two in the middle of the completely destroyed street. Suddenly, Rito's expression changes as he senses something urgent approaching. Noticing the threat, he orders an immediate retreat, and she promptly complies. As they flee down the alley, the young woman tries to understand what is happening there. During the journey, she questions whether he is, in fact, a doppelganger. The boy looks back, surprised by such a direct statement. By keeping up the pace, she assures that she knows his true nature. The mysterious woman then reveals that she shares the same essence as him. Upon hearing this, he tries to connect the dots to understand the revelation. Finally, she identifies herself as Hakua and asks for the young man's name. He hesitates, but Hakua interrupts him, warning him about the arrival of allies. Taking the lead, the warrior orders him to follow her without delay. Further on, a man in dark glasses waits with a confident posture. Hakua states that finding that man is a sign of hope. Weighing the risks, Rito decides that trusting her is his only option. However, Hakua's expression changes to terror as he gazes at the horizon. Explosion reveals several fallen bodies, terrifying the girl. In despair, Hakua kneels beside the remains of a certain Mr. Rose. Ryudo stares at the scene of carnage and flames, unable to believe what he is witnessing. Astonished, he inquires about the nature of that colossal entity ahead. Amidst the fire, a shadowy figure speaks about this corrupt world. The man with glasses displays a manic grin, relishing the utter chaos. Summoning a legion, he vows to plunge the entire city into the hands of those beasts. With a lethal army, the girl trembles, while Ryuto remains motionless. Hakoa comments that she is surprised by the number of monsters gathered there. The creatures march on, while the protagonist questions what kind of madness this is. A catastrophic energy distorts the sky and the buildings around it. Sensing the escalating danger, the boy demands to know what is happening. A colossal fissure opens above, bathing the street in a purplish light. Under the impact, Rito raises his arm to protect his companion from the wreckage. Observing the rupture, Hakoa warns that the world is heading towards collapse. Without grasping the gravity of the situation, the protagonist asks her to repeat the warning. Disregarding dialogue, the skeletal monsters advance against the young people. Sensing the attack coming from above, Ryudo warns about the enemy's assault. With no escape route, the pair prepares to block the heavy blows. In the midst of the battle, Hakoa insistently asks him to take care of himself. In return for her zeal, he asks her to keep watch against adversaries. With extreme dexterity, she dodges a claw aimed at her head. Taking advantage of the opening, she delivers a precise cut with her bladed weapon. In turn, the protagonist manipulates shadows to repel the monsters. Pressed by the horde, he vows not to succumb in that hostile environment. Unleashing his rage, he tries to smash the creature against the asphalt. Rito's eyes widen as he notices that the beast escaped his lethal blow. Emerging from the mist, the skeleton prepares an ultra-fast counterattack. Unable to dodge, the boy blocks the impact by crossing his arms irritated. The monster's immense strength pushes the young man, revealing its physical power. To make matters worse, the skull charges an energy blast aimed at his face. The lethal beam hits Ryudo squarely, causing a devastating bang in the street. Enduring the brutal impact, the protagonist bravely fights against the enemy's onslaught. Taking advantage of the opening, Hakoa leaps from behind and lunges forward to slice the skeletal monster. After the blow, the boy grumbles, frustrated by his extremely disadvantageous situation. Exhausted and losing a lot of blood, he collapses to his knees on the incandescent asphalt. The skeletons unleash synchronized energy blasts, descending from the sky in a fury. With murderous intent, the beasts focus on their targets down below, ready to kill. More dark aberrations swiftly emerge, infesting the skies of the ruined metropolis. Suddenly, a giant spectre claw crushes Hakoa with overwhelming force. The boy watches the scene in agony, powerless to help his companion in time. Clutching his injured shoulder, he realizes that not even his power could contain that impact. Rito searches for her through the thick smoke that fills the air. Observing the chaos, the boy shouts his friend's name, amidst utter despair. A sudden noise behind him cuts through the tense moment, drawing his attention. The young woman appears among the rubble, badly wounded but alive, bringing relief. Feeling a sharp pain, the doppelganger writhes while protecting her injured arm. He approaches, frightened, and she confesses that she can barely stand. Noticing his companion's vacant stare, he tries to understand what is troubling her so much. Turning her back on him, the warrior warns bluntly that defeat is inevitable. She warns that world is irreversibly heading towards its tragic end. Looking at the carnage around her, she declares that the city is doomed. Determined, the girl murmurs that this is now a final all-or-nothing attempt. She recoils swiftly, leaving the young man completely confused. Determined, she says she must focus on the unique chance to change that vile fate. As she flees, Rito reaches out his hand in a futile gesture, trying to stop her. Fearing the end, the boy orders her to move away from that imminent danger. A giant monster appears and fires a destructive beam at the girl. Seeing the lethal blow coming without restraint, the protagonist screams in pure terror. Illuminated by the enemy's glare, he remains paralyzed before the horrific scene. The explosion hits the warrior, scattering debris across the entire length of the street. Enveloped by the energy, she suffers intensely under the beast's cruel impact. Terrified, Rito screams her name as the air burns around him. He tries to run towards the flash, begging for everything to stop there. Even wounded, Hakoa orders him to jump into the dimensional rift in her place. Under attack, she warns that he needs to survive and get to the other side. Vibration rises to deliver the final blow to the defenseless girl. The monster impales the warrior while she sends for Crossray. Spurts, the boy runs in vain, begging mercy from fate. She begs, in a final breath, for him to reveal the whole truth. His weakened hand hits the cold asphalt, sealing his tragic and fatal fall. Paralyzed and bloodied, the boy panics, not understanding what's happening. The weight of his own wounds makes him groan in agony amidst the intense pain. Running, he feels he has lost everything as soon as he discovered his own power. Memories of the dead girls overwhelm him, and he laments not having saved anyone. In a survival instinct, he dashes towards the purple portal to escape. Focusing on the target, the skeleton fires a violent burst into the boy's back. Remembering Rakuna's hand, he questions why he accepted that help. The force of the impact engulfs him in a luminous explosion of absurd proportions. But instead of giving up, the protagonist's gaze reveals a fierce fury. Crossing the destructive beam with hatred, he pleads to save someone at last. With his last bit of energy, the young man steps onto the gleaming edge of the dark portal. The invisible power of the vortex pulls the boy into its distortion. Falling into the abyss, Rito screams with all his might, lost in space-time. Plunging into the vacuum, it plummets rapidly towards the unknown. Focused on a distant point, he reaches out to grasp the saving light. Floating fragments reflect the smiles of friends tragically lost. His pained expression changes to astonishment as he notices something unexpected ahead. Without warning, the protagonist suddenly wakes up, sitting at his school desk. Colleagues look strangely at the exaggerated reaction of the boy who just woke up. Through the window, the school appears peaceful under a perfectly sunny and calm day. He examines his hands, relieved to find no injuries. With wide eyes, he denies believing the absurd hypothesis he had thought of. Someone approaches the table, gently inquiring if something is wrong. He glances to the side and murmurs Rakuna's name, seeing her perfectly healthy. She faces the boy with silent serenity, holding her school supplies. Overcome with emotion, he realizes relieved that she is indeed alive. In a sudden impulse, Ryudo pushes the chair away forcefully and stands up hurriedly. The abrupt attitude surprises her friend, who recoils without understanding what will come next. In a tight embrace, he confesses that he thought he would never see her again. Everyone in the room stops what they are doing to watch the embarrassing scene. Breeze from the window makes her call him, finally waking him from that deep trance. Trembling with shame, he apologizes and uses sleepiness as an excuse. With her back turned, Rakuna dryly announces that she is leaving for the laboratory now. She leaves in a hurry, leaving the young man paralyzed and trying to explain himself in vain. Down the hallway, the girl clutches the folder to herself with an enigmatic look. Isolated in the hallway, she maintains a dejected expression with her belongings. The school bell rings, announcing the end of classes for the day. Returnino sighs, fearing that Rakuna now detests him. Standing on the road, he realizes he has gone back a year in time, but remains lost. Remembering Hakua's death, he knows he needs to investigate the lost area. The vision of the carnage returns, confirming that the tragedy will repeat itself. Observing the people, he vows that this time he will save them all. With determination, he states that he will use his own power to achieve this. The protagonist walks alone towards a dark alley in the city. Crossing the tunnel, he enters the dangerous territory of the lost area. Standing there, he admits to being shocked to have returned to that place again. Memories from 2 years ago show him walking through those same dirty alleys. At the time, the little boy walked with his head down, exhausted and helpless. The boy could barely find the strength to continue through that precarious environment. Without stability, he stumbles and falls straight onto the hard, packed dirt floor. Not alone, he feels the pain of his own weakness, trying to finally rise up. Fallen, he recalls that he lived right there, in that part of the lost area. He reveals that his given name was actually always Salt. He was just a fake Rito living in utter human misery. He considered himself a filthy beggar struggling to survive on the streets. Currently, he explains that the freaks receive food there weekly. Based on the location, it can be deduced that someone created the system to protect humans. You think the supplier of supplies may possess valuable information. He approaches the entrance to the meeting point of the shadowy creatures. Upon entering the warehouse, he is surprised to find the space completely empty. A sarcastic voice suddenly echoes, provoking the young man and mocking his rich kid appearance. A suspicious person asks why someone so well-dressed would be in a garbage dump. Visibly tense, Rito pretends he's lost and tries to leave the area immediately. The man gets up, ordering him not to hurry and to hand over his belongings without delay. Using strange abilities, he warns that if the boy intends to curse someone, he must be quick. Faced with the threat, the protagonist's eyes widen, overcome by intense terror. The enemy takes the form of a hideous mummy and mocks the boy, telling him to lament his bad luck. Backing away in despair, the young man begs, imploring that the monster wait a moment. Mocking the situation, the creature advances aggressively, challenging him to survive. A burst of dark energy surges swiftly, tearing through the air toward the attacker. Surprised by the counterattack, the monster freezes, unable to comprehend what had happened. The beast pales when it sees that the boy conjured a weapon to defend himself in time. Wielding his shadow blade, Ryudo notices with astonishment that his ancient power has returned. Irritated, the mummy rages against the boy's human clothes and orders his immediate death. Without wasting any time, the monster unleashes a lightning-fast attack using its bandages. Skillfully dodging, the young man understands that fighting is now his only option. They both jump and their forces collide in the air, generating an overwhelming shockwave. The creature recoils, firing a barrage of razor-sharp blades at its opponent. Convinced of his advantage, the villain displays a cruel laugh, treating the boy with utter disdain. The protagonist, however, concentrates a dark and dense aura in the palm of his hand. Unleashing his power, Rito retaliates, warning the monster not to brag so much. The dark magic strikes the aberration's chest with brute, destructive force. Suffering severe damage, the monster is thrown away in a sudden movement. Defeated, the man returns to human form, stretched out on the ground while smoking. As he approaches, the young man reflects on how that territory remains lethal. At that moment, he recalls the central purpose that led him to that den. Pressing the thug, the boy asks if he knows someone called Rei Kurozu. The man panics, asking if he is referring to the leader of the Atagarsu. Placing his dark knife against the subject's neck, Rito confirms his knowledge. Under mortal threat, the bandit sweats profusely and promises to reveal everything he knows. He details that the organization manages the control of aberrations under Kurozu's command. Following the clue, the protagonist advances alone down a gloomy and dark corridor. Standing before a heavy iron door, he deduces that he has found the headquarters. A dark-haired man waits, radiating a latent danger. Cautiously tapping on the middle, the boy asks if anyone is present. Upon turning the doorknob, he was surprised to find that the entrance was unlocked. Entering the luxurious room, he is impressed by the surroundings and announces his presence. An overwhelming presence suddenly appears behind him in absolute silence. Reflexively, drawing his shadow blade as he turns around. Facing the intruder, Rei Kurozu asks what a doppelganger wants with him. Intimidated by the leader's authority, the young man hesitates, unable to find the words. The man repeats the insult with a deadly look, causing the protagonist to stammer with tension. Wielding the weapon in a defensive stance, the boy tries to articulate a response. Completely out of patience, Kurozu delivers a kick that sends the young man flying an absurd distance. The violent impact throws the boy against the checkered floor of the elegant room. Stepping on the invader's head, the leader immobilizes him while he groans in pain. He questions the audacity of the invasion and asks if the young man is seeking immediate death. Pressed, the boy confirms his identity and mentions that Hakuo sent him. Upon hearing the name, the commander's expression changes, revealing a slight surprise. Beneath the enemy's brute, Ryudo warns that disaster will strike within a year if nothing changes. Recalling the air massacre, he suffers as he relives the cries of agony from the victims. Crushed against the floor, the young man murmurs as he tries to withstand the oppressive pressure. Without warning, the commander delivered a brutal kick, sending the boy flying. Fallen, the protagonist begs the man to at least listen to his story. However, the enemy advances toward him with firm and decisive steps. Staring at the wounded boy, the leader warns that he needs to prove his worth to be heard. He points to his ear, daring him to touch his personal earring. The young man is stunned, while Kurozu states that the method is of little importance to him. The commander provokes him, urging him to demonstrate this awakened power. Rito understands that the leader already knows his ability, and that he is being tested. Accepting the duel, the boy stands up, stating that he understands the challenge. Exuding dark energy, he charges forward with everything he's got, letting out a war cry. The protagonist throws a straight punch, but his opponent dodges with complete ease. Trying again, he delivers a swift blow that cuts only through empty space. The boy launches into a violent sequence of attacks, but the leader effortlessly dodges each one. Exhausted by the futile series of attacks, the young man breathes with difficulty. The leader responds ironically, asking if that's all the boy's strength is. Imposingly, he states that the boy should have mastered this power long ago. The infernal scene of fury and grief floods the young man's mind once more. Recalling the hatred he felt, he hears his opponent question the benefit of it. The memory of the dark energy flowing brings back the feeling of that trauma. The protagonist observes his own hands, invoking the dark aura once more. Observing him, the commander silently confirms that his intuition was correct. A violent aura surrounds the boy's arms as he prepares to fight. He finally realizes that something dormant awakened on that terrible day. In a swift movement, Ryudo unleashes a dark claw attack against the target. Despite the distraction, Kurozu jumps away unharmed, classifying the attack as clumsy. Persistent, the boy spins in the air, cutting through everything, but the leader retreats with agility. Appearing in his blind spot, the leader pronounces that the boy's movements are slow. With precision, he delivers a blow that sends the protagonist flying sideways. The devastating impact throws the young man brutally against the ground. Wounded, he struggles to maintain consciousness, recognizing the immense strength of the enemy. Walking calmly, the leader points out that this didn't even serve as a warm-up. Cruelly, he pronounces the boy a failure incapable of protecting those he loves. Trembling with pain, Rito refuses to give up and reaffirms his inner resolve. The memory of Hakuo reaching out to him suddenly returns. He also remembers the dying girl begging him to tell the truth. Clenching his grim fist, he vows to save both of his companions. Far away, the orange sunset illuminates the city with an apparent peace. The serene scene highlights a simple residential building under the twilight light. In his room, Rikuna observes the landscape through the window while the breeze blows. The young woman prepares for her break, putting her school uniform aside. Leaning on the parapet, she breathes deeply, lost in thought. With firmness, she vows to fulfill her goal in the name of the one who rescued her. The reflection of the city lights in his eyes denotes absolute conviction. Returning to the fight, an unseen blow throws the boy against the wall. He glides through the wreckage as the shadow tentacles disappear. Weakened, he collapses to the ground, groaning under the immense injury he has received. The commander stands beside the defeated soldier and labels his effort pathetic. Gazing at the scene, the leader confesses that he expected more fun, disappointed. Seeing the enemy turn his back, Rito leans on the ground and begs him to stay. Rising with effort, he states that he cannot afford to give up now. Leashing a burst of dark power, the boy pleads for the fight to continue. Undeterred, Kurosu brushes the shadows away with one hand, noticing the boy's stubbornness. The leader's expression hardens, revealing seriousness and danger in the face of his insistence. Determined to end the night, he activates his own energy, illuminating the entire room. Even wounded, the protagonist channels all his vigor into a single straight punch. The rival notices the shadow trick, finding the tactic curious but ineffective. In the blink of an eye, the commander levitates the boy using a giant shadowy hand. Then he throws the young man against the outside asphalt with extreme brutality. Tapping his fingers on the barrel, the leader remarks that he doesn't know how to use his strength. Lost and in pain, the boy tries to get up, seeking to understand the advice given. With bloodshot eyes, the man decides to force the awakening of the dormant power. Displaying a sadistic grin, he summons a breathtaking, dark technique. The scenery distorts, sucking the young man into a nocturnal dimension filled with flowers. Under a full moon, the ruins of buildings covered in vegetation stand out. Sitting amidst the rubble, the protagonist looks around, amazed and confused. Kurosu appears, revealing that this is the Night Realm, a different plane from the real one. The leader explains that this devastated city is the true domain of the beasts. Still processing, the boy listens attentively to the rules of that strange world. As he walks, the man remarks that ordinary doppelgangers lack latent magic. His footsteps echo as he says that extreme emotions alter this scenario. The commander explains that intense feelings awaken rare special abilities. Pointing to the young man, he classifies him as one of those cases, leaving him astonished. Confidently, the man extends his hand and challenges him to a real duel. The boy summons his dark weapon and says that he has finally understood the mission. The leader, however, suddenly raises his face and orders him to wait a moment. They both sense something approaching, interrupted by a strange unease. Surprised, the antagonist identifies the threat advancing towards them. A giant skeletal monster emerges in the alley, a native creature that the leader did not expect. Drawing his blade, the man explains that these beings differ from humans. With danger looming, he warns that such beasts will never act as their allies. Memories of that brutal attack from the past flood the young man's mind. Wielding his weapon, he notices that the beast from the past also came from there. The skulls fix their gaze on the pair, aware of their presence there. The creature leaps through the air, initiating its lethal assault without hesitation. Quickly, the boy raises a shield of darkness and groans under the impact. Taking advantage of the opening, the commander leaps and slices the target with absolute precision. With impeccable posture, he faces the threat with a deadly, icy focus. The boy watches, impressed by his partner's superhuman agility. Turning around, the leader orders him not to retreat, assuring him that he will be watching. Ryudo agrees, aware that he needs to defeat those beasts now. By summoning dark arms, he knows it's the only way to alter fate. However, the boy's desperate attacks fail against the skeletal defense. Under pressure, he feels frustrated at not being able to hit the enemy directly. Analyzing the scene, the commander questions what exactly the young man is afraid of. The man realizes that he would easily die if he faced the beast head-on. However, he reminds the boy that he is a manipulator of shadows. The master advises against limiting your attacks solely to your internal energy. By dodging, the protagonist begins to understand the master's crucial clue. Without hesitation, the boy bravely advances toward the colossal monstrosity. The skull fires an energy beam aimed at quickly incinerating its target. Sharp reflexes, he glides across the asphalt, narrowly escaping. The heat of the explosion hits him, making him groan from the immense effort. Closing the distance, he raises his weapon upwards, ready to retaliate. The dark blow strikes the enemy's defense, sparking with extreme violence. The beast retaliates with a brutal shove before he finishes his attack. Regaining his balance, he celebrates finally catching up with his opponent. Focused on victory, he steps firmly, using shadows as an extension of his body. In a cunning move, he plunges into the darkness and disappears from sight. Their strategy works by emerging from the shadows behind the distracted creature. With intense glint in his eye, the protagonist declares that he has him cornered. He summons countless tentacles of darkness, binding the giant skeleton. The claws gripped him with absolute force, preventing any chance of escape. Confident, he shouts that this time the freak will have nowhere to go. The beast tries to struggle in vain against the deadly trap. He grips the blade handle, concentrating as much energy as possible. Swiftness, Rito delivers a deep cut that tears the skull in half. The impact shatters the creature, scattering its remains across the dark alley. Faced with this feat, the boy murmurs in amazement that he has finally triumphed today. After the fight, Kurosu calmly walks over to the young protagonist. With a wry smile, he remarks that defeating monsters should be simple. Suddenly, a beam of light tears through the air, passing close to the commander's face. Without hesitation, the leader blocks a stealthy claw using only his fingers. The surprise attack causes the man to show a slight shock at the audacity. Oblivious to the danger, the young man smiles proudly as he tries to speak again. However, exhaustion takes its toll, and the boy's body collapses to the ground. He falls unconscious, while the man watches him silently from the side. The commander supports him so that he is not injured on impact with the ground. Exhausted, Rito breathes softly, finally resting after the tense battle. Returning to the problem, the leader stares at the darkness with a glacial gaze. A horde of skeletons emerges from the entrance, hungry for blood and destruction. Without fear, he snaps his fingers, creating a luminous spark of power. Materializes as an immense incandescent red sword. One brutal movement, he slices through the army, leaving a devastating trail. Among the impaled bodies, he smiles, concluding that the boy will be useful. Sometime later, the protagonist opens his eyes under the white light of the ceiling. Sitting on the bed, he grumbles in confusion, not knowing where he is now. Observing his hands in the dim light, he tries to process recent events. The memory of the fight returns, leaving him astonished by the distorted dimension. Examining the room, he wonders if he has returned to the human world safely. Kurozu appears on the wall, announcing that the sleeper has finally awakened. Startled, the boy stammers as he tries to articulate a response. The leader, serious, assures that he will fulfill his promise and listen to your account. He turns the doorknob, making way for a more appropriate conversation. Proceed to a luxurious room, where the young man remains nervous and upright. Seated, the commander waits while the boy hesitates about how to begin. Gathering courage, Rito reveals that he has returned from a year in the near future. Hearing the absurdity, the man narrows his eyes with genuine interest. Confirming, the protagonist declares that global collapse is inevitable. Recalling that horror, he warns that global collapse is inevitable if the course of events does not change. The scene of the carnage with beasts invading the metropolis returns to haunt his thoughts. Lowering his voice, he admits that his account sounds difficult to accept. Kurozu readily agrees, labeling the whole story as complete insanity. However, the boy insists desperately that every word spoken is the pure truth. Frustrated, he wonders if his return to the past served absolutely no purpose. Maintaining his composure, the leader asks what the young man's immediate plans are. Ryudo is caught off guard by the commander's direct and unexpected question. Clenching his fists tightly, he hesitates before he can formulate a response. With a firm gaze, he declares his desire to become stronger than anyone. He then promises to eradicate all the creatures that ruined his life in the future. The leader smiles slightly and warns that at the moment, he is still excessively weak. This brutal frankness undermines the heroic pose the young man was trying to maintain. The man, however, considers that a chance of gaining power really does exist. Now, when extremely interested, asks what he means. The commander speaks of a former member, known as the legendary Master of Shadows. Founder of the group, he possessed an unparalleled talent for mastering darkness. Like, the founder was a doppelganger who awakened unique abilities. The boy is shocked to discover that Kurozu is, in fact, a vampire. To calm the situation, the leader explains that this happened a long time ago. At that time, Kurozu fought alongside the master on dangerous missions. The mysterious partner eliminated monstrous aberrations effortlessly. Arms of dark energy, he annihilated his enemies with absolute power. Inspired, the vampire also advanced fiercely against the dark beasts. The owlie unleashes devastating blows, tearing monsters apart with blades of energy. Amidst the chaos, he always maintained an impeccable and ruthless demeanor. The leader concludes that this partner was a veteran and formidable warrior. At present, the boy murmurs, admiring the fame of that fighter. Kurozu notices movement at the door and announces that the rest of the squad has arrived. Heavy footsteps echo in the hallway, indicating someone's imminent entrance. A group of agents enters the room, greeting the leader authoritatively. Rito is surprised by the number of powerful members gathered there. One of the members bumps into him as she passes by, leaving him completely embarrassed. Under pressure, the boy quickly apologizes and tries to make some space. A masked agent stares closely at the rookie, making him even more frightened. Impatient, the leader orders the brat to stop messing around and serve drinks. One of the members delivers an urgent report for Kurozu's analysis. With a command, the owlie turns on the room's screen to display the data. The squad observes a detailed map of the city projected on the screen. Red dots reveal that portals are frequently appearing everywhere. The agent points out a suspicious piece of data obtained through tracking. He reveals that the wanted criminal was seen prowling around those cracks. While serving drinks, Rito overhears the group naming him as the prime suspect. Thoughtfully, Kurozu suggests that this enemy might be summoning the monsters. The masked man notices, surprised that the young man next to him was awake. The commander calls Rito, making the boy jump in fright and answer. Pointing to the map, the leader orders him to report if he sees the villain. The protagonist stammers, unsure if he is already an integral part of the team. Leaving no room for doubt, the vampire officially recognizes him as a member. The sudden revelation leaves the young man paralyzed and in total shock. The other agents look on, confused, not knowing who the newcomer is. The leader challenges the boy to match the founder's level of power. The boy adopts a focused posture and accepts responsibility. He reflects that only with such strength will he be able to save Racuna from its cruel fate. With conviction, Ryudo vows that he will become the next Shadow Master. The next day, the weather dawns calm over the school buildings. On the court, the physical education class continues with the girls playing volleyball. The close score has the crowd cheering, chanting Rakuna's name. With skill, the young woman leaps high to execute a powerful serve. The ball explodes in the opponent's field, with no chance of defense whatsoever. Her teammates celebrate the decisive point, praising Rakuna's talent. Displaying a proud smile, the young woman savors her momentary victory. On the other side of the gymnasium, the boys are playing a basketball game. Away from the game, the protagonist silently observes the group having fun. His friend Ren hugs him, lamenting that the other class seems more lively. Your colleague asks for your opinion while you're enjoying a break. Without waiting, Ren pulls him back onto the court, promising serious play now. The game restarts with the team advancing quickly towards the basket. With agility, Rito easily dribbles past all the opponents in front of him. In a panic, the defenders try to close the net to stop him quickly. The protagonist dominates the court with quick and very precise movements. A student shouts, urging the others to stop the play at all costs. Impressed, the girls stop what they are doing to watch the play. Rakuna focuses his gaze on the neighboring court, calling Ryudo's name softly. Ignoring the marking, the young man leaps into the air for the final basket. Overcoming the defense, he scores the point that seals the game's outcome. He celebrates by high-fived his teammate after the play. In the stands, Rakuna watches the play with deep admiration. The bell rings, ending the day's activities as the twilight light floods the school. Putting away his things, Ryudo asks what his friend will be doing tonight. Ren jokes, asking if they're secretly dating each other. Embarrassed, they both deny the gossip with utter despair and timidity. The colleague laughs, provoking a clumsy reaction from his friends in front of him. Changing the subject, he suggests a visit to the old secret hideout. Rakuna agrees excitedly and Ryudo concurs with the idea of revisiting the place. The trail continues down the alley, heading towards the abandoned convenience store. The old hideout in the forgotten area still serves as their base. The interior reveals a simple space with old arcade machines. Sitting down, she comments that the place brings back memories of when they used to run away from punishments. Ren curses, irritated as he recalls the difficulties of that school period. He complains about the injustice of having to hold buckets of water because of his appearance. Rito remembers the scoldings while his friend says she can't stand remembering anymore. The boy says that teacher made them go through hell. Rakuna smiles, eating his lunchbox and saying that he doesn't want to live through that. Ren questions whether she always eats the same dish there. Rito defends his friend, asking what the problem is with her taste. Observing the group, he silently reflects on his mission of protection. With a determined look, he promises himself that he will save this world. Suddenly, the cell phone on the table vibrates incessantly, drawing attention. The young man picks up the device, intrigued by the message he just received. The screen displays a squad emergency alert indicating the elimination of aberrations very close by. His eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the urgent notice, while his colleague calls his name. Sensing the sudden tension, Rakuna asks if something went wrong. Disguising his concern with a forced smile, the boy assures everyone that everything is fine. In a hurry, he says goodbye, inventing an urgent appointment, and tells his friends to leave ahead. Concerned about his sudden haste, his friend asks him to wait a moment. But the protagonist ignores the call and runs desperately down the dark alley. As he flees, he curses in frustration that the invasion happened just when the group was there. A terrifying female scream cuts through the silence of the street, immediately alarming the young man. Identifying the source of the sound, he changes direction, quickening his pace. The corner, the boy freezes in step, completely startled by the unexpected scene. A civilian appears lying on the ground while another man holds her, asking if she is alive. Faced with the confusion, Ryudo tries to understand what the hell happened to the unconscious woman. However, heavy footsteps echoing nearby suddenly catch the boy's attention. Turning his face away immediately, he shouts, demanding to know who is approaching. Squad Executive Rose emerges, clicking his tongue and wondering if he's too late. The man on the ground orders the agent to step aside, while the boy quickly recognizes the allied reinforcement. Looking closely at the boy, Rose also remembers seeing the brat in the hideout the previous day. In the midst of the tense conversation, the veteran notices something bizarre moving in the shadows, right behind him. A monstrous, multi-headed aberration emerges from the darkness, ready to attack. The dark alley quickly becomes infested with several of those dangerous creatures. Terrified, the civilian asks what it is, and Rose explains that they are the Shadow Eaters. The agent warns that the monsters came from some portal and devour people's shadows until they die. Far from that danger, the pair of friends continue to wait patiently at the secret base. Staring at her phone screen, the girl is puzzled by Ryudo's lack of response to her messages. Colleague Ren stretches his arms in a relaxed manner and suggests that they stop by his house since he has disappeared. Still with a bad feeling, the young woman simply agrees with the idea in a low, worried tone. Unaware of the threat, the two begin walking back home through the completely deserted streets. During the journey, Rikuna considers the possibility that his mother called demanding her son's return. Laughing at the guess, the friend agrees that the protagonist's parents were always overprotective. Observing the melancholy late afternoon, the girl hopes that this is the only silly problem. Hidden in the shadows of a nearby alley, one of the bizarre monsters spies on their movements. The young woman suddenly stops walking, sensing a menacing presence very close by. Noticing her paralyzed reaction, Ren turns his face and asks what happened. A grotesque aberration silently tumbles from the wall, ready to attack the girl from behind. Realizing the deadly trap, the girl freezes in terror, letting out a frightened whimper. The boy screams his colleague's name in despair as he watches the creature advance uncontrollably. With a swift lunge, the monster sinks its claws directly into the shadow cast on the ground. In a bizarre way, the beast pulls the dark silhouette of the girl and begins to devour her cruelly. Immediately, Rikuna feels its energies being drained and loses any sign of strength. Dropping the folder, the young woman collapses to her knees, realizing her own shadow has completely disappeared. Unable to resist, she collapses unconscious onto the cold asphalt with a heavy fall. Witnessing this tragedy helplessly, the friend screams at the top of his lungs, completely in shock. Returning to the other alley, the situation worsens as well, with the horde cornering the protagonist and the agent. One of the creatures leaps fiercely, ready to sink its teeth into the distracted boy. Displaying great agility, Rose leaps from the side wall to intercept the threat in mid-air. The experienced fighter firmly extends his hand, focusing on the flying enemy target. With a brutal attack, the veteran violently smashes the monster against the ground, destroying the creature. Impressed, Ryudo's eyes widen at the raw display of strength from his new battle partner. Enraged by the fall of their ally, the entire horde lets out a terrifying roar, ready to massacre them. Rose adjusts her glove, grumbling that the report indicated the presence of 7 of those creatures at the location. Immediately afterward, he activates his dark power, and the agent's hands rapidly transform into monstrous claws. Assuming the imposing form of a ferocious werewolf, the executive confidently warns that he will take them all down single-handedly. Without wasting any time, the veteran speeds down the alley at an absurd pace, promising to finish the job in one go. With a swift and brutal attack, he slices through several monsters simultaneously, scattering the creatures through the air without the slightest difficulty. Impressed by the scene, Ryudo realizes with shock that his ally speed and power have increased absurdly after the transformation. Showing all his experience, Rose announces that he has already taken down 4 and prepares to hunt down the rest of the enemies. Realizing their absurd disadvantage, 2 of the surviving aberrations turned their backs and began to flee desperately down the alley. One of the creatures rushes into a dark alley, letting out a terrified grunt during its frantic escape. Seeing the target escape, the protagonist rushes forward, telling the monster to wait right there. But Rose calls the boy an idiot and tells him not to run off alone like that, clicking his tongue in irritation. At that moment, another enemy tries to interfere, and the werewolf tears the beast in half, ordering it to get out of the way. Free from immediate danger, the veteran searches for the boy in the alley, trying to understand which way the rookie ended up. Running down the street, the young man recognizes the path to the secret base and decides he needs to take down the monster before it reaches his friends. Being very agile, he summons Shadow Claws, trapping the fleeing beast, and decrees that it will not escape unpunished. Pulling the enemy back with all his might, Ryudo uses his darkness to force the aberration to come directly towards him. Taking advantage of the force of the pull, the boy lands a perfect dark blow and severs the creature's head in one brutal movement. The decapitated body of the monster collapses heavily onto the asphalt, confirming another successful elimination of the night. Exhausted after the tense chase, the boy breathes a deep sigh of relief, trying to catch his breath after the run. Doing the math, he deduces that only one enemy remains and sincerely hopes that Rikuna and Ren are safe. With this concern in mind, the boy resumes running hurriedly through the destroyed scenery to find the last target. During the journey, the protagonist continues desperately hoping that his colleagues have already returned home safely. However, turning the corner, he gets a huge shock when he finds Ren kneeling on the ground, completely in shock. Running towards them, Ryudo calls out to his friends in terror while his friend murmurs his name back, also very frightened. Kneeling beside the unconscious girl, the boy panics, demanding to know what the hell just happened. Crying profusely, Ren explains that a black monster attacked suddenly and begs forgiveness for not being able to do anything. Quickly, the protagonist assures that it wasn't his fault and asks if his colleague is hurt, hearing that he is fine. Assessing the dangerous situation on the street, Ryudo suggests that they need to take refuge inside an old pharmacy nearby. Once inside the safe zone, Ren rummages through the dirty lockers looking for anything that might be useful in the situation. At that moment, the boy suddenly gets up and tells his friend to keep an eye on Rikuna lying on the worn-out sofa. The friend stops what he was doing and asks, quite confused, where Ryudo is thinking of going at this hour. With an extremely serious look, the protagonist warns that he will hunt the monster and recover its shadow, as this is the only way out. The young woman remains completely unconscious on the upholstery, suffering the bizarre consequences of the attack by that dangerous aberration. Deeply shaken internally, the boy curses, realizing that this attack had never happened before and that the future has already been altered. Startled by the suicidal plan, his colleague questions how on earth he intends to retrieve a shadow on his own like that. Trying to convey as much confidence as possible, the boy interrupts his friend's despair, assuring him that everything will be all right. Walking towards the exit, he reiterates his request for Ren to take care of her, and solemnly swears that he will save his friend. Ignoring his colleague's desperate call, the young man dashes swiftly out the door back into the violent street. Running along the sidewalk, he notices several civilians lying by the wayside and concludes in frustration that they have all lost their shadows as well. Turning suddenly to check a dark alley, the protagonist's eyes widen as he finally spots his hidden target. Focusing his vision on the darkness, he angrily confirms that he has found the person responsible for all that damage. The grotesque monster appears crouching at the end of the alley, finishing devouring the shadow of yet another defenseless victim. As soon as the beast swallows the energy, Ryudo quickly deduces that this is the seventh and final creature of the invading group. Putting the pieces together immediately, he concludes with certainty that the same monster swallowed his friend's shadow. Consumed by uncontrollable fury, the young man leaps forward with a powerful battle cry as he prepares his dark blade. The creature senses the imminent danger and raises its strange arms, managing to block the initial impact of the attack. Without backing down an inch, the protagonist quickly transforms his weapon into a giant scythe and attempts to slice the beast. But Ryudo gets a big shock when his aggressive strike doesn't have the desired effect against the abomination's body. Displaying bizarre agility, the shadowy monster dodges the swift slash by quickly leaping to the opposite side. The boy freezes in confusion as the hideous creature turns its back and begins to run frantically down the alley in an attempt to escape. Focused on the fugitive's trail, the boy advances swiftly, ordering the useless creature to seize its escape immediately. During the chase, he reaches a corner and cautiously peers, trying to anticipate the beast's next moves. Upon glimpsing the end of the alley, the protagonist freezes, shocked by the scene unfolding before him. A dimensional rift opens, tearing through the air, and the aberration leaps out, plunging into the intense glare of the light. Fearing to lose the trail, the young man shoots off, determined not to let the monster escape his sight. Suddenly, a blindfolded girl stretches out her arm, shouting for the boy to abandon that dangerous madness. Rito instantly stops in his tracks, turning around in surprise at the stranger's unexpected interruption. He stares at the newcomer suspiciously, demanding to know the stranger's identity immediately. The fair-haired girl remains alert in the lit alley, watching the boy without making a sound. Upon noticing the young woman's features, the protagonist is shocked, murmuring the name of his deceased companion. Keeping his guard up, Hakuwa orders his retreat, warning that the portal leads to a fatal destination. Still stunned, the boy shows his organization identification, proving that they are both allies. She analyzes the profile. Confused, he understands that version of the past still doesn't know him. Putting the device away, Ryudo ignores the warnings and states that he will enter the rift to save his friend. Faced with his stubbornness, the warrior gripped his wrist firmly, demanding that he wait a second. She warns about the risk of the portal collapsing and questions whether he has mastered the technique of crossing over. The boy stares at the tense vortex, inquiring about the possibility of it closing, which she confirms. The veteran explains that the gates disappear when the creatures exhaust their energy or are defeated. Noticing the rookie's inexperience, the doppelganger sighs, deciding to accompany him on the risky mission. Relieved, the boy stammers his thanks, overcome with deep gratitude for having her there again. With the plan laid out, the pair walk together, passing through the illuminated portal in the middle of the street. Crossing the rift, they land safely on the roof of a building in the distorted kingdom. Immediately, the protagonist examines the gloomy landscape, searching for the trail of the shadow, devouring monster. Breaking the tension, the girl notices the lack of introductions, revealing her name and asking for his. Ryudo hesitates for a moment, beginning his reply with a nostalgic look directed at the warrior. Picking up the thread again amidst the chaos, he hesitates before finally revealing his true identity. The protagonist introduces himself as Salt, confirming that he is a doppelganger like her. Hakuo displays restrained surprise, commenting calmly that he seemed to already know such a secret. The young man searches for clues. She admits she doesn't know the hiding place, only that they prefer dense shadows. When questioned about this darkness, the partner assures him that defeating the enemy there will restore everything. She clarifies that the devoured shadows return to their original owners upon eliminating the creature. The warrior assures her friend that she will survive, provided the rescue takes place within 24 hours. Aware of the deadline, the boy adopts a determined stance, readily accepting the mission. The young woman suggests searching places where such aberrations usually gather. Moving away from an abandoned building, the boy mentally wonders about the hiding place of the cowardly beast. Assessing the perimeter, Hakuo rules out the presence of the target, but refuses to go any deeper. She points to the sky, warning that the red moon will strengthen the beasts of that kingdom. Stopped on the destroyed road, she proposes a tactical retreat due to the increasing danger. However, the protagonist clenches his fists, resolved never to lose someone important again. Focused on rescuing Racuna, he advances alone, surprising his companion with such audacity. Attempting to dissuade him, the warrior emphasizes the lethality of that place under the effects of night. But Ryudo continues under the crimson light, firmly declaring that he will not run away this time. Noticing the boy's unwavering determination, the young doppelganger hesitates and decides to follow him. Letting out a long sigh, she finally gives in, agreeing to escort the stubborn boy. Observing the city's ruin, Hakuo vows to remain by his partner's side until the end. Soon, they notice shadows lurking on a wall. The protagonist finds it strange, thinking they are humans. The warrior corrects them, identifying them as aberrations of the real world, an irritating obstacle. Gazing into the bright eyes in the darkness, the boy agrees that the gang will be a nuisance. Time slips away and the pair enter a strange forest, bathed in pink light and exotic flowers. Stopping in the dark woods, the boy proposes a careful investigation of the enemy. While Hakuo maintains an attentive silence, Ryudo feels guilty for involving her in this. Regretful, he apologizes, but his partner reaffirms her free and conscious choice. Suddenly, a swift arrow cuts through the air, striking the two distracted young people. Caught off guard by the sneak attack, the protagonist lets out a cry of astonishment. Dodging, they assume a fighting stance, while the boy demands to see the attacker. Frustrated by the mistake, a small creature, with a sack over its head, clicks its tongue in the darkness. Moments later, a horde of these bizarre, armed monsters emerges from the bushes. Rito inquires about their identity. Hakuo explains that they are Minots, weak but menacing creatures. The tribe's leader displays a diabolical laugh, staring at the invaders of his sacred territory. Attempting diplomacy, the boy asks for passage, assuring that they are not seeking violence. The creature silences him, calling him trash and proclaiming exclusive ownership of the place. The protagonist argues that, like them, the pair also consists of aberrations. Laughing, the monster replies that they are different, since his tribe devours humans without mercy. The statement shocks and disgusts the young man, who reacts with repugnance. The Band of the Freak describes the irresistible addiction he feels for human flesh. Overcome with revulsion, Ryudo declares that any understanding between them is impossible. A subordinate questions the tribe leader about the invaders' ultimate fate. The entire gang shouts in unison, demanding the immediate execution of the two intruders. Supporting the axe, the chief smiles maliciously, revealing that the verdict has been sealed. Without further ado, Ryuto and Hakuo draw their blades, preparing for the final showdown. Seeing the horde charging, the boy concludes that there are no alternatives. She fully agrees. Minot's army surrounds the pair, while archers position themselves high in the trees. Hidden archer fires a fatal arrow directly at the two young people. Reflexes, Hakuo spins the blade, slicing the projectile before impact. Taking advantage of the opening, the protagonist summons a giant hand of darkness and shouts for his partner. The warrior leaps, dodging ground attacks, urging her companion to be careful. Repelling the attacks, Rito curses, frustrated by the excessive number of enemies. Studying the tribe's tactics, the partner proposes eliminating the leader to disperse the group. With the target identified, they both advance, taking down the smaller monsters along the way. Breaking through the defense, they approach the chief, who waits firmly with his heavy axe. Underestimating the threat, the little monster laughs mockingly, daring them to capture it. Focused, Hakuo hurries forward without noticing the ground. The protagonist shouts, warning her. With no time to break, the girl's footsteps on a fake pile of dry leaves. Ryudo runs desperately, trying to prevent the ambush from being carried out against her. The young woman falls into a deep hole, and the boy launches himself into the air after her, to the laughter of the monsters. During the fall, he stretches out his hand in a futile effort to catch his friend. Up there, the leader peers into the hole, laughing and ordering the invaders to be killed. Descending into a dark well, they both scream at the top of their lungs, with no control over their fate. They are launched from a giant pipeline directly into a flooded underground reservoir. The pair hits the water with an impact, generating a noise that echoes through the hidden cave. Soaked, they recover. Hakuo comments on how lucky they were to have fallen into deep water. Gasping for breath, the boy surveys the bizarre surroundings, trying to locate his position. Takes his first step into the water, exploring that unfamiliar and silent landscape. Walking through the flooded hall, Ryudo notices, fascinated, that light is emanating from the flowers. Looking at the ceiling, the warrior confirms it's a trap and warns about the red moon. She reveals with concern that this lunar phase blocks the magical ability to return. Confused, Rito inquires about the matter. She clarifies the restricted use of portals or gifts. Hakuo concludes that the moon's energy prevents any desperate attempt to escape. Facing the exit at the top, she concludes that she needs to go up that route. Without losing hope, the protagonist agrees and asks what the escape plan is. Sliding through the damp, dark tunnel, the boy tries to understand his companion's strategy. The force of the current hurls them through the pipe toward a completely uncertain destination. The protagonist desperately tries to grab onto a rock ledge to stop the advance. Hakuo shouts his name, warning him of the imminent danger that awaits at the end of the path. Failing to hold on, Rito plummets awkwardly while the girl lands with absolute elegance. Fallen and in pain, he grumbles that he almost made it. She asks him not to push himself so hard. Soaked in the debris, the boy ends up letting out a loud, involuntary sneeze. The warrior simply watches in absolute silence while her partner tries to clean her clothes. Suddenly, she firmly grasps his hand, taking him completely by surprise with the gesture. Pulling him close, she explains that they need to stay close to preserve body heat. It suggests a short break for rest, given that they have been running non-stop since they arrived. They sit leaning against each other on the cold floor, leaving the boy visibly embarrassed. Breaking the ice, Hakuo inquires about Ryudo's reason for joining the Yatagarasu. Upon hearing the question, the boy's expression changes as he recalls a crucial fact. The tragic vision of his friend dying and ordering him to find Kurosu resurfaces vividly. The scene of destruction reflects the young man's despair in the face of that inevitable sacrifice. At that moment, the wounded warrior demanded that he deliver a vital warning to follow. With his hand covered in blood, he revealed that a young woman had made a request of him in the past. Back in the present, the protagonist recounts the contents of this enigmatic message to his partner. It reveals with seriousness that their world will soon perish under attacks from aberrations. The memory of the sky being torn apart and monsters annihilating the city returns with force. She questions the meaning of it. He confesses that he felt an urgent need to intervene. Ryuto admits that the story sounds insane but swears by the veracity of his words. The doppelganger listens to the alley's confession while maintaining an extremely calm and attentive demeanor. He comments that he is an enigmatic character, but that he is clearly not lying. Relieved, the boy questions whether she truly believes his statements. With a gentle smile, Hakuo confesses to feeling comfortable next to him. However, evokes Rikuna, and he regrets never having shared the truth. Gathering his courage, the protagonist takes advantage of the truce to ask a serious question. The warrior turns her face away, devoting her full attention to her ally's words. He bluntly asks her what she thinks about them being curses incarnate. Lowering his head, the boy wonders if creatures like them should even exist. Before she can answer, a loud noise suddenly interrupts the conversation. She looks up, alarmed to see fragments falling from the cave ceiling. Jump, narrowly escaping being hit by the giant rocks. Looking up, they realize that the tribe of monsters has located their hideout. One of the enemies smiles maliciously, while the pair realize the risk of being buried alive. The monsters begin hurling dozens of explosive barrels through the top opening. Ryudo lunges ahead of his partner, taking up the defensive front line. A devastating explosion consumes the underground area in a blinding flash. Up above, the horde celebrates, convinced that the invaders have been crushed. The hole is filled with debris and a thick, suffocating curtain of smoke. At the bottom of the cavity, however, the protagonist maintains a barrier protecting his unharmed ally. The boy dispels the magic, fixing his gaze intently on the top of the tunnel. Convinced of victory, the enemies turn their backs, ready to leave. The boy steps firmly onto the debris, using the stones as stepping stones. It shoots vertically through the tunnel at an absurd speed, surprising the creatures. The little monsters panic when they see their target emerge from the depths. The protagonist lands on the forest floor, facing the tribe with a defiant look. Soon after, Hakuo emerges, relieved by her successful escape from that deadly trap. Invoking his blade, the young man mocks the fact that the ambush made his escape easier. By the sarcasm, the enemy leader orders an all-out assault against them. Focused, the partners advance, wielding their weapons with absolute readiness. Perfect synchronicity, they slice up several monsters simultaneously inside the forest. Seeing his army being decimated, the leader realizes their superiority and tries to retreat. But Ryudo appears behind him, trapping the beast with a hand of shadows. With a deadly look, the boy decrees the end of that decisive confrontation. With a merciless blow, he slices the monster's body, splattering blood into the air. Determination shines in Ryudo's eyes as he maintains his fighting stance. The devastating impact neutralizes the grotesque creature, eliminating the threat once and for all. Once on the ground, the boy sighs, commenting on how irritating that interruption was. Resuming the course of the mission, they both run swiftly through the dark corridors. Suddenly, they stop in their tracks when they hear noises of figures ahead. A gigantic humanoid monster, adorned with horns, walks down the destroyed street. Facing the beast, the protagonist states, relieved that he has finally located his target. Releasing a shadowy hand, the boy steps forward, vowing that the monster will not escape. The creature merely turns its face away, noticing the approaching attack with indifference. With brute force, the monster crushes the boy's magic, shattering the darkness. The beast turns completely around, wielding a gigantic club with a menacing air. Ryudo's eyes widen in shock at having his attack nullified so easily. Without wasting any time, Hakuo leaps, charging at the enemy with courage. She makes a direct cut, but the beast blocks the blade with its own arm. They retreat in frustration, realizing that the opponent's physical resistance is absurdly high. The monster brandishes its heavy weapon, preparing a devastating blow. The partners swerve at the last second, avoiding a red shockwave. Running, Hakuo deduces that the creature fed on excessive amounts of human shadows. While the monster destroys buildings with its club, she searches for a way out. Assessing the situation, he concludes that combining their shadows could create an opportunity. The aberration unleashes a burst of energy, forcing them to dodge across the asphalt. During the escape, Ryudo asks how exactly they should merge their powers. The warrior urgently extends her hand, asking him to hold it. Without hesitation, the boy brings his hand close to hers in the face of danger. Upon contact, a luminous energy flows intensely between the two combatants. Dark power envelopes Ryudo, who becomes completely focused on the counterattack. A dark and gigantic aura erupts around it, splitting the ground beneath the monster. Taking advantage of the flow, he aims directly at the colossal aberration. A colossal beam of darkness is unleashed upon the waiting monster. The impact hits the target, causing the beast to roar in agony as it is swallowed. Crushed by violent magic, the grotesque creature falls heavily to its knees. Finally, Ryudo extends his blade, ensuring that the battle is over now. Leaping high, he dives with a gigantic shadow blade onto the beast's back. The brutal slash cuts through the enemy from top to bottom in a swift attack. The monster disintegrates into pieces, while the young man lands safely. Impressed, he notes that his strength has increased exponentially with the help of his ally. Hakuo runs off to celebrate the victory, and Ryudo agrees, exultant with the triumph. Dozens of dark silhouettes emerge from the remains of the slain monster. Seeing the energies rising, the warrior warns that everything will return its original owners. However, the boy notices that the red moon persists, keeping them trapped there. Immediately after, the young woman points upwards, signaling a crucial change. The moon returns to its silvery color, confirming that they can finally return to the human world. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief at the wonderful news, knowing that the deadly danger has finally ceased. Crossing the portal, the pair walk calmly through an alley in the now peaceful human city. But keeping his pace steady, the boy thinks of his helpless friend, longing for her to be completely safe. He thanks her for the company, but his partner replies curtly that she was only doing her duty. Suddenly, the warrior abruptly stops marching and falls silent, leaving the boy confused. She confesses to feeling that, in fact, it was he who saved her, but the young man promptly denies it, turning his face away. Humbly, he asserts that he would never have defeated that dangerous enemy if he had been alone in the battle. Amused by the sincerity, the ally suggests classifying the final victory as a great joint effort. Ryudo thanks her again, while she says she will write the full mission report for the base. As the warrior departs into the darkness, the boy hurries, asking her to wait a moment. Returns to the sensitive subject of the fatal curse they discussed earlier in the underground cave. The young woman glances over her shoulder, silently awaiting the ally's response to the question. In his memory, he had questioned how she coped with knowing that she was killing her true human copy. Feeling insecure, he wondered if creatures like them, copies of humans, should even have existed. Back in the present, the partner assumes a serious posture, processing the young man's pain. In a straightforward manner, he states that causing this deadly tragedy is the inescapable destiny of his lineage. The painful past emerges, and she explains that nothing can undo the tragedy that has already occurred. Gazing at it, he decrees that the only way is to seek a personal way to redeem himself from the error. Confused by the enigmatic words, asks how he should seek this specific redemption. Calmly, the friend advises that such an answer is something only he can discover for himself. The protagonist absorbs the advice, repeating its words while reflecting on the weight of the journey. In a welcoming tone, she assures him that he can always turn to her if he feels overwhelmed. Hearing that unconditional support makes the boy smile, feeling immense relief in his chest. The young woman bids farewell and leaps over the alley walls, returning to the secret organization. Watching him leave, the boy waves, mentally thanking him for all the essential assistance he provided. Alone on the empty street, he assumes a serious expression, remembering the tasks that still remain. Without hesitation, he dashes down the sidewalks, heading straight towards the abandoned pharmacy from before. He opens the door breathlessly, profusely apologizing for the delay in returning to his old hideout. Inside, Ren sighs with immense relief upon confirming that his best friend has returned alive. Entering the chaotic hall, Ryudo feels more relieved seeing his colleagues safe and sound. Ignoring everything, she runs to check on her friend, who is lying a little further ahead. He kneels worriedly beside the girl, who remains unconscious on the torn upholstery. She happily notices the return of her shadow, as she begins to moan softly upon waking. Raccoona slowly opens her eyes and murmurs her friend's name, weakened by the attack. Sitting down, he scratches his lost head, asking the boys where the hell he's gone. Trying to piece together the memories of the night, he innocently wonders if he was just sleeping. Lets out a deep sigh, feeling immense joy at seeing her unharmed. Ren watches the reunion in silence, trying to understand the strange atmosphere between the two. Suddenly, the collie hurriedly gets up and holds the girl's hands, relieved by her return. She finds the exaggerated reaction strange, while the blonde man tries to talk about the bizarre monster. Ryudo acts quickly, asking for silence, leaving his partner confused by the abrupt interruption. Whispering, he advises that it's best not to tell the truth now to avoid unnecessary panic. Realizing the secret, Raccoona demands explanations, and the blonde boy begins to stutter under pressure. Cutting off the interrogation, Ryudo pulls the girl aside, warning that they need to go to the hospital immediately. Ren faces his best friend suspiciously, aware that he is hiding a serious secret. Later that night, the trio cautiously arrives at the front of the central hospital. After the consultation, the girl leaves thanking the doctors for the quick and accurate care. The colleague asks for the result, and she confirms, smiling, that she has no hidden injuries. Noticing the protagonist's disappearance from the hallways, she says he went out to run a favor. His colleague points out how Ryudo's mysterious behavior is suspicious today. He questions how Ryudo plans to retrieve the shadow alone in such a dangerous manner. Keeping calm, the protagonist assures everyone that everything will turn out all right in the end. Ren reflects suspiciously, remembering how his friend had dodged the monster with such precision. Outside the hospital, under the cover of night, the young man gently calls the girl's attention. She asks how much she remembers of what happened that day, leaving her friend confused. Her mind searches for some recollection of the exact moment the creature attacked her. Lost in thought, she only remembers something dark suddenly appearing before she completely fainted. Walking beside her, the boy asks with a firm look if she knows what an abomination is. Raccoona repeats the word lost, without understanding the meaning of the sudden question. Far away, the protagonist remains seated alone on a park bench in a deserted square. He concludes that the blonde man suspects something serious and doesn't know how to proceed. Observing the illuminated lamppost, he ponders whether he should reveal the truth about the monsters once and for all. He gives up, concluding that confessing would make his friend discover that he is not human. A sad memory of the encounter in the alley resurfaces, reinforcing the weight of the lie. Remembering the admitted farce, he hears the voices of his friends calling him to play. He waits excitedly during the game, enjoying that peaceful school life. Lower your head, acknowledging that it's not the right time to reveal your identity. Days pass, and he returns to walking through the alleys of the lost area. Looking at his cell phone, he tries to focus on the location of the training center so as not to be late. Distracted, he walks right past a strange man in a white lab coat on the narrow street. Suddenly, he feels a sinister chill run through his entire body all at once. Startled, he immediately turns his face around, searching for the source of the sensation. However, the corridor is empty with no sign of the man nearby. He tries to calm down, thinking it's his imagination, and turns his attention back to the device. His gaze notices something strange just ahead, capturing all his attention. Standing before a simple metal door, he deduces that he has found the secret hiding place. Pushing the doorknob, he enters, remembering the warning that it would be unlocked. He begins to descend a long, silent staircase that leads to the basement. Entering the hall, he asks permission and hears a deep voice coming from upstairs. A man with glasses leans on the handrail, greeting him with a surprised smile. With a relaxed posture, Executive Rose announces that he will be your official instructor today. Nervous, the young man agrees formally, but the veteran tells him to relax. Going down, he states that he will only go over the basics of Yatagarasu first. He calmly mentions the first technique taught will be nocturnal transmigration. Ryudo listens to the name, paying attention to every word spoken by his superior. The memory of the commander activating that dark magic resurfaces in his mind. It recalls the devastated world, full of ruins under the light of white flowers. Focused, he concludes that this was the same skill used by the boss recently. Rose asks if the newcomer has visited the place before, receiving a nod in response. With a push, he decrees that without accessing that kingdom alone, he will be useless. It details that he needs to tear space apart to connect the two dimensions precisely. seriously warns that miscalculations could send the user to another time period. Sweating profusely, the boy desperately asks how to align these dangerous coordinates. The superior raises a blue stone, explaining that it will serve as a magic compass. Handing over the jewel, she warns that he needs to subdue the abomination within it first. Without warning, a dark energy filled with macabre eyes leaks from the stone. The bizarre creature floats, staring at its surroundings with dozens of reddish pupils. Terrified, the protagonist lets out a scream and an awkward leap backward. Startled, the jewel slips from her trembling hands, falling to the floor. The little shadow monster lets out a disturbing laugh, mocking the boy's cowardice. Sitting comfortably on the stairs, the instructor simply announces that he will be observing the commotion from a distance to assess the student's posture. But the flying beast ignores the peaceful advice and charges like lightning straight to finish off its unsuspecting target. Rito's eyes widen in panic, and he demands that the strange creature wait a second before its deadly attack. Meanwhile, in a huge abandoned and crumbling housing complex, a terrible atmosphere dominates the air. Firm, slow footsteps echo through the dark corridors of the isolated building, revealing the walk of someone mysterious. The man in the white coat opens the door of one of the apartments, calmly announcing that he has finally arrived home. In a dark corner of the room, a monstrously large aberration murmurs terrifyingly that it is hungry again. Without showing any fear of the beast, the villain simply questions how that creature can feel hungry so quickly. The grotesque creature takes a step forward, growling in the darkness that he could no longer tolerate that miserable amount of food. Displaying a dangerous red gaze and a sadistic smile, the man complies with the request and suggests they begin hunting immediately. The villain raises his gaze, staring at the skeletal face of his monstrous brother, and swears as vengeance against the humans who did this. The following day, the city college awoke bathed in beautiful sunlight, appearing more peaceful than ever. Inside one of the classrooms, the students chat casually, lazily awaiting the start of yet another ordinary class. However, the protagonist is completely passed out, collapsed on the table, suffering the physical consequences of the intense training. Seated in the front seat, Rikuna focuses her gaze on her friend's tired face, conveying a very evident concern. 11:16. The school bell quickly echoes loudly through the buildings, marking the end of the long afternoon school period. Lifting his head with some difficulty, the boy gives a long stretch along with a big yawn. Standing firmly on the edge of the table, the friend complains with her hand on her hip, demanding to know why he only knows how to sleep lately. Stuttering awkwardly, the boy invents the worst possible excuse, claiming he spent nights playing online games. The girl sighs and lowers her gaze, completely silent, looking quite sad at her companion's blatant lie. Noticing her troubled demeanor, Ryuto realizes she's been acting strangely ever since the day they visited the old hideout. Breaking the silence, the friend raises her voice, drawing his attention precisely to that fateful day. Caught off guard by the direct interruption to the forbidden topic, the young man stammers, letting out a nervous noise of surprise. The young woman grips the boy's arm tightly, demanding to know exactly what happened on the abandoned street. With a fixed gaze, she asks the fatal question, wanting to understand why he fled so suddenly from the secret base. Leaving the two of them alone. Pressed against the wall, the protagonist tries to invent a flimsy excuse and stammers, saying that nothing much happened that day. But the terrifying memory of the shadowy creature, grabbing the girl, suddenly returns with full force to her mind. Clutching her arm tightly, the young woman insists she was attacked by a very bizarre black monster. Trying to calm the situation, Ryuto lies, saying that she was just very tired and that freaks don't exist. Annoyed by the stalling, she points out that Ren also keeps avoiding this same question all the time. Her gaze fixed on her friend, the girl asks directly if he is hiding some secret from her. The boy jumps up from his chair, assuring everyone that he's not hiding anything, but his friend immediately retorts, stating that it's a lie. Completely trapped, the boy runs desperately out of the classroom, leaving everyone behind. Looking at her empty wallet, Rikuna sighs in frustration, concluding that her colleague only knows how to tell lies. Outside, the young man leans against the wall, remembering another time in the past when he also tried to lie. On that occasion, he ran down the corridors apologizing and making up stories about needing to use the bathroom urgently. The girl was left behind, completely confused, not understanding why he ran away so suddenly. A nostalgic memory emerges, showing the two of them playing in a very sunny park during their childhood. Swinging together in the playground, little Ryuto calmly tries to get his friend's attention. Lowering his gaze somewhat dejectedly, he suddenly confesses that he might end up dying very soon. Around the time of the 8th grade, the boy spent his time on the swing, while contemplating his own grim fate. Completely surprised by the pessimistic statement, Rikuna asks where he got that crazy idea out of nowhere. Getting off the ride, the protagonist simply turns his back and apologizes in case the worst happens. He runs off through the park without explanation, ignoring his partner's desperate cries for him to wait. Later that same day, the scene shows the girl's house under a very melancholic late afternoon light. Sitting in her room, the young woman rests her chin on her hand, muttering her friend's name with considerable concern. Suddenly, her mother bursts into the room, slamming the door open to announce terrible news. The woman recounts in despair that Ryuto ended up drowning in the ocean, leaving the girl in a complete state of shock. Returning to the present in the classroom, the girl squeezes her own skirt tightly, trying to control her frustration. Looking out the window at the courtyard, she murmurs that her friend almost scared her to death with that old lie. Far away, the boy walks alone through the school corridors, letting out a deep, tired sigh. Going down the stairs, he deduces that his colleagues are suspicious, but refuses to involve them in such great danger. At that moment, his cell phone beeps, revealing a mission alert to eliminate an aberration in an abandoned factory. Analyzing the coordinates on the screen, the boy realizes that running away from school now would only leave his friend with more questions. However, he clenches his fist quite firmly, knowing that he cannot simply ignore the call of duty. Rushing down the empty hallway, the young man mentally apologizes, assuring himself that all this training is precisely to protect her. A memory from training shows the boy advancing swiftly with his blade against that little monster full of eyes. Using all his agility, the protagonist delivers a brutal blow, slicing the strange creature mercilessly. The monster dissolves into black smoke, revealing the small, bright blue stone that plummets straight to the ground. Breathless, the boy listens as Instructor Rose praises his good performance in his first attempt at magical combat. With his gloved hand, the veteran picks up the glistening ore from the floor with ease. The superior explains that by using this stone it is possible to transmigrate to the realm of night or even banish enemies there. He adds that fighting in the human world would reveal the existence of the corporation, and that would be a big problem. Pointing confidently, the man assures the newcomer that he is counting on him, and the boy agrees immediately, stammering. Checking his own watch, the executive suddenly remembers that the young man's combat uniform should be arriving soon. Back in the present, the scene shows the large industrial area full of warehouses where the mission will take place. Already at the meeting point, Hakuo raises her hand, excitedly beckoning her companion. Surprised to find his colleagues, Ryuto asks if they too have been assigned to take down the target in that region. Taking a drag on his cigarette, the veteran clarifies that he actually summoned the boy because he manages that entire area. The rookie appears wearing his new, well-fitting combat overcoat, while the master compliments his intimidating look. Displaying a gentle smile, the girl gives a thumbs up, saying that her partner looked amazing and should have more confidence. Turning his back, the veteran calls the group's attention and indicates that it's time for them to begin sweeping the area. The trio walks side by side, entering through the main door of a dark and completely abandoned warehouse. Observing the distraction, the boy notices the absurd mess while Hakuo tries to figure out where the target might be hiding. Adjusting his glasses, the instructor reveals that teenagers broke into the place as a prank and ended up spotting the beast. Suddenly, the three of them freeze in the middle of the shed, completely shocked by the grotesque sight ahead. A gigantic green monster appears stretched out on the floor, completely torn apart and covered in blood. Examining the fatal wounds, they realize with horror that the main target has already been eliminated by some mysterious person. Completely lost, the young people wonder if some other agent of the organization might have passed by there earlier. But the veteran's eyes suddenly widen as he senses an extremely dangerous presence coming from the direction of the ceiling. Desperate, the man shouts at the top of his lungs, ordering the two rookies to get out of that position immediately. The pair turn their faces away immediately, completely taken by surprise by the commander's urgent warning. A brutal bolt of electricity strikes the warehouse floor with absurd violence, sending a shockwave through the air. In the midst of the smoke, a dark and muscular warrior emerges, staring at the group, leaving Ryuto completely stunned. The terrifying skull-masked enemy mutters hatefully that humans are evil and need to be annihilated. Without wasting time on conversation, the invader advances swiftly toward the protagonist, prepared to deliver a lethal blow. The clenched fist of the threat glows intensely, charging an absurd amount of magical electricity. Displaying excellent reflexes, Ryuto leaps, narrowly dodging the punch that shatters the warehouse floor. The young man recoils, breathless and impressed, realizing that the enemy can indeed manipulate destructive rays. Sliding across the concrete floor, he gains a good distance to better analyze his opponent's movements. Assessing the strange aura, the instructor curses, stating that this creature is no ordinary aberration from the kingdom of night. The warrior kneels on the ground, seemingly already recognizing the dark and dangerous origins of that mysterious warrior. Completely ignoring the boy, the electric villain dashes off at insane speed straight towards Hakuo. Realizing the fatal ambush, the veteran desperately shouts his subordinate's name, trying to warn her of the imminent attack. With a firm stomp on the ground, the man leaps from his spot, ready to intervene in that cowardly attack. Placing his own body in front, the instructor crossed his arms, blocking the violent impact before it hit the girl. The brutal electric shock pushes the veteran back, making him groan in pain, while the girl calls out to him in distress. Overcome by an uncontrollable rage, the young doppelganger draws her blade, asking how he dares attack her companion. In a courageous leap, she advances with her weapon drawn, attempting to slice the masked enemy in a super fast counterattack. However, the warrior retaliates by unleashing a colossal lightning blast that mercilessly engulfs the girl in mid-air. Hakuwa is brutally thrown to the ground after being struck by her opponent's electric discharge. Seeing his companion fall like that, Ryudo screams her name, overcome with despair. Faced with the brutality, the young man is stunned by the magnitude of the strength his opponent displays. He realizes that the masked warrior is far from being a common aberration and inquires about his nature. Right behind them, Instructor Rose grumbles, lying on the ground, warning that his body is numb from the impact. Suddenly, soft footsteps and a quiet meow break through the heavy atmosphere of that shed. The protagonist turns his head, intrigued by the origin of that unexpected noise. A kitten appears, licking its paw amidst the chaos, leaving the boy completely confused. Without delay, the electric villain advances like lightning, heading towards the defenseless animal. Terrified by the beast's intentions, Ryudo orders the monster to stop immediately. The enemy's gigantic, shadowy claw approaches, ready to capture the little creature. However, the warrior holds the cat with extreme delicacy, using both hands. Witnessing such affection, the boy is paralyzed, unable to comprehend what is happening. The monster confesses, relieved, that the animal is safe and promises to protect it from then on. Faced with this, both the young man and the veteran observe the bizarre scene without uttering a word. Separated, Hakuwa groans, struggling to get back up from the devastated asphalt. Ryudo rushes to help his partner, and she, breathless, confirms that she is all right. Observing the enemy focused on the feline, the young man questions what kind of entity it is. Intrigued, he insists on discovering the true identity of that imposing individual. Suddenly, a male voice echoes from above, questioning what Yuri is doing there. The protagonist looks up, spotting the newcomer on the metal walkway. A man in a white lab coat and dark glasses looks down arrogantly at everyone from above. The boy's mind immediately recalls the warning at the base about that dangerous criminal. He informs his partner that the scientist's face was already appearing on the organization's monitors. Rose gets up, now recovered, and points upwards, demanding the identification of the intruder. Facing the target, the veteran inquires what he plans to do by loitering around that dimensional portal. Displaying cynicism, the villain calmly states that it's all just an experiment. Outraged by the mockery, the instructor echoes the word, indignant at the man's coldness. The scientist confirms the plan, vowing to drown the world in aberrations to reset reality. Upon hearing the threat, Hakuwa feels a sharp pain and lets out a groan of pain. Trauma awakens the memory of a young woman trapped and fleeing from a terrifying monster. Holding a small blade, the terrified girl begged the creature to back away. Under the fierce attack, she tearfully admitted that she no longer wished to fight. But the aberration fired a beam of energy, causing the victim to scream in agony. Consumed by a flash of light, the girl was massacred without any trace of mercy. In the warrior's memory, the scientist observed the carnage, isolated behind a glass. Returning to the present, Hakuwa loses control and screams, while the young man calls out to her in distress. Supporting his trembling partner, Ryudo desperately asks what is happening to her. Observing the scene, the man in the lab coat recognizes the doppelganger girl with slight surprise. However, the villain turns his back, declaring he has no time to waste on Yatagrasu. The snobbish attitude leaves the protagonist confused, unable to understand the enemy's plan. Obeying the order, the electric warrior confirms the command, still holding the cat in his lap. The scientist raises his hand, preparing his evacuation magic. A gigantic dimensional portal appears, illuminating the entire dark warehouse with its glow. Shocked by the massive energy, the trio of agents watches the rift appear out of nowhere. From the depths, a scalding energy seeps out, cracking the floor structure. A flaming colossal fist strikes the concrete with overwhelming brutality. Facing the unbearable heat, the boy wonders in amazement what is emerging there. An abomination made of incandescent magma roars forth, illuminating the entire surroundings. As he leaves, the villain calmly warns that this monster will be their opponent. Ryudo stretches out his arm, desperate, telling the man in the lab coat to wait right there. However, a wave of fire forces him to retreat, protecting his own face. The lava creature blocks the passage, preventing the pursuit of the invaders. Assessing the heat, Rose warns, worried that the building will quickly turn to ashes. The veteran checks his compass and concludes that they must kill the monster on the spot. Summoning his blade, the young man prepares for battle, frustrated with the situation. His gaze focuses on the threat, remembering the electric warrior who fled. Analyzing the auras, he suspects that those enemies do not come from the night realm. Departing, the scientist grumbles that allying with humans is utter stupidity. The villain pets the cat and advises his lackey to curb his mania for adopting animals. Disdainfully, he challenges the agents to defeat his genetically modified abomination. Immediately, the fiery beast launches an attack that melts everything in its path. Sensing the approach, the group positions itself, preparing for the impact. A volcanic eruption consumes the space where the trio was seconds ago. Quick reflexes, Rito leaps away, gripping his dark scythe firmly. He spins his body, diving with a dark and powerful blow. The boy's eyes widen in astonishment as he sees his weapon ricochet off the hard body. Without respite, the magma giant retaliates with a side punch of absurd speed. He uses his darkness to narrowly escape, sliding across the industrial floor. Suddenly, a pillar of flames erupts from the ground, taking the boy by surprise. Thrown by the force of the heat, the protagonist screams, falling a long distance. Rose takes the front line, ordering the rookie to retreat, as he will control the fight. Hakuwa questions the veteran, wanting to understand what his suicidal strategy would be. Activating his power, the instructor's hand begins to transform into a furry claw. In his werewolf form, the executive orders the students to simply watch the show. He lets out a ferocious roar, throwing a colossal punch at the lava monster. The brutal impact hits the beast, generating a shockwave of enormous proportions. Demonstrating full strength, the veteran maintains an impeccable posture in the face of battle. However, the flaming abomination remains standing, exhaling unbearable heat. Rito marvels at his master's display of raw power. Regaining his composure, the instructor admits, frustrated, that the animal is resilient. Grotesque creature begins to carry a sphere of fire in its hands. The monster unleashes its fiery attack, causing a terrifying explosion. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the werewolf decides to distract the beast, avoiding a frontal attack. Using his agility, the veteran runs while the abomination destroys everything around it. The executive warns that he will not be able to protect the newcomers and orders them to survive. Ryuto notes that the strength is evenly matched, but the flames are a deadly obstacle. Determined to help, he activates his magic to create an opening for his partner's attack. Gigantic hands of darkness advance against the monster amidst the flames. However, he is startled to see his skill being easily countered. The infernal heat melts the boy's dark hands in an instant. Frustrated, he wonders what to do until his friend calls him. She approaches limping and, ignoring his pleas to back away, refuses to stand still. Courageously, Hako extends her hand, offering her own magical energy to her partner. Meanwhile, the werewolf continues leaping through the rubble to escape the eruptions. Observing the enemy's pattern, the veteran believes he has found a favorable opening. However, a burst of flames strikes the instructor before he can counterattack. Suddenly, immense shadows invade the scene, surprising the aberration. Taking advantage of the distraction, the dark arms grab the giant with overwhelming force. Holding firm to the magic, the protagonist shouts, ordering the master to attack, without mercy. The executive grasps the strategy perfectly and adopts a combat stance on the asphalt. Darkness envelops the volcanic monster, struggling to contain the creature's violent movements. Tearing through the air, the werewolf launches in a swift charge directly at the trapped beast. However, the target's temperature rises drastically, beginning to melt the magical barrier. Groaning in pain, the boy pleads with the veteran to hurry, who immediately confirms his readiness. Seeing his darkness consumed by fire, the young man panics, not knowing how to contain it. Suddenly, an epiphany crosses his mind, causing him to focus on an idea of extreme risk. With absolute determination, he steps firmly into the darkness that has accumulated over the shed. The partner notices his suicidal intentions and screams, desperate to understand his elaborate plan. Ignoring the warnings, the protagonist begins to siphon the violent magic directly into his body. Observing the scene, the pair of allies are astonished by the boy's reckless behavior. Rito decrees that swallowing the dark energy is the only way to overcome that intense heat. Immediately, a dark and chaotic aura explodes around him, shattering the entire environment. His hand turns to pure darkness, and he realizes he will lose control if he hesitates too much. Overwhelmed by the overwhelming power, the rookie roars with visceral fury, facing the abomination head-on. The colossal clash between absolute shadows and infernal flames shakes the building structure. Then a massive pillar of dark energy bursts through the ceiling, tearing across the night sky. After the brutal blow, the werewolf returns to human form and runs with the girl through the wreckage. They both arrive at the smoking crater, while the warrior cries out in despair for her companion. The young man appears, prostrate with his face to the ground, exhausted and completely covered in soot. Upon realizing he survived, the partner sighs with relief and curses the boy, calling him crazy. Right behind them, the executive approaches, assessing the absurd damage caused by his own apprentice. The girl kneels down and, with a trembling voice, begs him to hold on tight and not faint. With enormous effort, the protagonist emits a slight groan and opens his eyes lethargically. The instructor promptly supports him from behind, helping him to sit down safely. Outside, the fire destroys the shed, drawing the terrified attention of the neighborhood. The veteran announces his awakening, and the groggy boy murmurs apologies for all the chaos. Facing the out-of-control fire, The young man despairs, warning of the need for help. The superior, calmly, assures that he has already activated a highly reliable reinforcement for the task. An enigmatic woman appears, and the instructor thanks his partner, named Miyuki, for attending. The elegant executive wields considerable power within the organization while maintaining a completely serene demeanor. The boy watches her and remembers seeing her lurking near the hideout earlier. The warrior whispers that the woman can control ice, information that the master quickly confirms. Clasping her hands, Rose asks for forgiveness for the sudden call outside her jurisdiction. The woman sighs, silently agrees, and concentrates intense freezing magic in her hands. Releasing her power, the executive calmly announces that, for now, she will let the favor pass. A freezing blast sweeps through the area, causing the newcomers to cower, terrified by the extreme cold. The absurd force channels itself through the woman's arm, generating a blizzard amidst the fire. Amazed, the boy observes the incredible mystical transformation that the veteran has just manifested. The executive assumes the celestial form of a frosty legend, floating majestically beneath the night. Excited by the scene, Hako points to the building, celebrating the success of the freezing operation. In the blink of an eye, the devastating flames are annihilated by the cutting fury of the blizzard. Completing the mission with mastery, the powerful mage displays a gentle and satisfied expression. Later in Yatagarasu's room, the group finalizes the detailed report of the violent incident. Commander Kurosu analyzes the troubling information about the portal villain and the unknown beast. Sitting nearby, Rose warns that the scientist radiates a strange aura, a mixture of human and monster. Upon hearing the master, the protagonist lowers his head, remembering having felt such energy before. On the opposite side of the table, the doppelganger remains in absolute silence, staring at her own hands. Concerned about her tension, the boy approaches and whispers, asking if she is all right. The warrior is startled by the approach and tries to hide her distress during the meeting. Apologizing, Hakawa stammers, trying to justify himself by claiming he was just distracted. Rose comments thoughtfully that the mysterious enemy seemed to have a certain intimacy with the young woman. Immediately, the girl lowers her head, overwhelmed by the uncomfortable weight of that revelation. The dark memory of that scientist with the macabre face invades her thoughts. Analyzing the context, Kurosu wonders if that was the man responsible for capturing her in the past. Taken aback by the frankness of the question, the warrior experiences a slight startle. Hesitantly, she searches for the right words to begin recounting that painful truth. Finally, he confirms the leader's suspicion, gaining the courage to confess everything he has experienced. The memory goes back to a night in the city, where she recounts being born from her own shadows. Wandering alone by the tracks, the child confesses that she didn't know how to survive. Exploring deserted alleyways, she notes that there was no one to help her in that despair. Sifting through the trash for scraps, she admits to feeling completely lost and abandoned. Huddled in a filthy, dark corner, the little girl recounts how she met the man there. The little doppelganger raises her eyes, exhausted and hungry, in that desolate alley. With no prospects, he confesses to having accepted the hand offered by the manipulative scientist. The villain made her the offer, inviting her to live with him in his own house. At that moment, the girl nurtured hope, believing in a much better future. However, she was imprisoned and subjected to terrible experiments, amounting to pure torture. Immersed in continuous fear and despair, the girl finally activated her dormant power. The little girl recounts that she learned to manipulate shadows right there, in that captivity. From then on, his life was confined to fighting in brutal and endless battles. The scientist forced her to confront all sorts of aberrations, while merely observing coldly. Even after being released, she continued to obey orders due to a complete lack of alternatives. Returning to the present, the warrior sighs, overwhelmed by the pain of those memories. She reveals Akira Tanegashi's name, and that the immense abomination is her brother Yuri. Ahako warns that the villain loved to threaten to drown that corrupt world in abominations. Irritated, Rose concludes that the wretch abused her and harbors extremely harmful ambitions. Seeking to understand the situation, Ryudo asks how his partner escaped that oppressive control. Honestly, the young woman confesses that the idea of running away had never crossed her mind. Hearing this, the whole group is perplexed, trying to understand the reason for this submission. The man was teaching her that humans were a danger and should all be eradicated. She mentions the intense brainwashing, but Ryudo questions what made her change her mind. Displaying tenderness, the girl recounts how her perspective changed completely after meeting someone special. In the past, the little warrior lay exhausted and abandoned in an alley at the end of the afternoon. Suddenly, a calm and friendly voice caught the attention of the girl lying on the ground. A blonde human boy appeared, showing concern for her condition. He knelt beside the little girl, trying to offer help in a gentle and careful manner. Startled by his proximity, she leaped back swiftly, surprising the boy. At a safe distance, the girl assumed a rigid and defensive posture. Seeking to calm the tension, the boy raised his hands, asking that he not be afraid. Akira's lie about human savagery echoed strongly in the girl's mind. Overwhelmed by brainwashing, she summoned shadows, frightening the innocent human boy. The blonde youth froze, unable to comprehend the nature of that strange magic that had manifested itself. To the little girl, he was just a deadly enemy that needed to be exterminated without delay. Consumed by false teaching, she prepared to deliver a merciless, deadly blow. In a sudden impulse, she lunged forward furiously, while the terrified boy cowered on the ground. However, her body collapsed from exhaustion, and she fainted before completing the attack. The boy opened one eye, realizing that the fatal blow had not materialized. Staring at the unconscious girl, he muttered, wondering what the child's problem could be. Later that night, the scene shifts to the interior of an abandoned bus in the junkyard. The little girl rests peacefully lying on the dusty seats of the old vehicle. The boy appears holding a convenience bag and notices that she has finally woken up. Startled by the approach, the young woman jumps, becoming alert again. Very calmly, the boy extends a bottle of water, assuring her that he won't hurt her. The little girl stares at the offered water, feeling very suspicious of this sudden kindness. Crouching in the hallway, the boy asks if she's hungry and tells her he brought a snack. Right at that moment, the girl's stomach growls very loudly, completely giving the game away. The human offers her a sweet bread and carefully asks if her wounds still hurt. Completely lost in the situation, the doppelganger stares at the snack without any reaction. Breaking the silence, the little girl quietly asks why he is helping. Quite relieved, the boy celebrates the fact that the girl finally said something. Filled with guilt, she recalls trying to attack and kill him moments before in the dark alley. The boy admits he got a huge fright and asks what kind of creature she really is. To be perfectly honest, the little warrior confesses with her head bowed that she is not human. In the following days, the young man continued to care for her and bring her food to that hiding place. The boy prepared a hot snack for the two of them by heating water over a campfire outside. Excited, he gets on the bus announcing that the instant noodles are ready. While they eat together, the little one counts that she belongs to a breed called doppelganger. Impressed, the boy finds it incredible that there is a human in the world exactly like her. The girl reports that the time spent with him made all her fear and hatred of humans disappear. With a gentle look, the boy assures her that he doesn't care about her race and asks her not to be afraid. Hearing such pure words leaves the little girl completely amazed and very emotional. Then, the human gets up to leave and she hurriedly asks where he is going. Walking towards the exit, he announces that he will be moving the next day and will not be able to return there. The news of the farewell hits the little girl hard, leaving the warrior very depressed. Saying goodbye with a gentle smile, the boy tells Hakuo to take care. At that point, the young warrior realizes that he left very suddenly. Still inside the abandoned bus, she is startled to notice a black notebook on the seat. Quickly, the girl gets up and goes to the door holding the object, trying to call him. A memory shows the boy handing her that notebook, thinking it would be useful. Standing there outside, she vows never to return to the lab or betray anyone again. Free from the brainwashing of the scientist Akira, the young woman acts on her own for the first time. So, she starts walking through the city and ends up finding a recruitment poster on the street. Following the clue, the girl opens the door of a bar, drawing the attention of everyone inside. Facing the men at the counter, the little doppelganger remains completely silent. Confused, leader Kurosu questions her presence, but the girl merely observes him intently. Sitting on the counter next to him, she listens attentively as he talks about the Yatagarasu group. Determined to change who she was in the past, she moves forward with firm steps, wanting to repay her debt. The girl vows to repay everything that kind boy has done for her in the future. Thus, Hakuo grows and reveals that it has officially joined the secret organization. Back in the present, the group processes the revelation in the meeting room. Instructor Rose questions who exactly this scientist is who kept her prisoner. The girl claims that the man's goal is to destroy that world using the abominations. She reports that the villain harbors a deep hatred for humans, and Kurosu suspects something. Paying attention, Rito realizes in horror that the enemy is a true monster. The image of carnage with monsters invading the city returns to haunt the newcomer. Quite tense, the boy concludes that it was the scientist who caused that disaster in the future. Kurosu narrows his eyes, assuring everyone that he's heard of this Akira before. Suddenly, she immediately surprises Hakuo and Ryuto. Maintaining a serious demeanor, the vampire explains that the villain worked at a research institute. The executive Rose recalls this group secretly studied aberrations behind the scenes. Hearing about research involving monsters leaves the protagonist completely shocked. The commander recounts that the facility was closed, but reveals that humans were also involved. At the table, he concludes that humans created this body of research to confront the creatures. Empty laboratory corridor appears, revealing where all of this took place. In the past, the scientist Akira visits his younger brother in a hospital room. Young Yuri weakly acknowledges their presence and apologizes for the trouble. Displaying a gentle smile, the patient shows gratitude for the company of his older brother. However, a shadowy monster breaks the glass, shouting the boy's name in the empty room. The scientist's eyes widen, overcome by profound shock and uncontrollable fury. Alone in the darkness, the man breathes heavily, suffering from the terrible loss. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he refuses to accept his brother's death and grumbles in agony. An old photo shows the two embracing and happy, marking the pain of that tragedy. Obsessed, the scientist works in a dirty laboratory while the monster Yuri plays in the corner. The great freak observes a small kitten with considerable curiosity and affection. Raises its paws, playfully engaging in a fluffy toy. Analyzing the scene, Akira finds the monster's amusement with the pet strange. With a slight smile, the villain suggests that the giant brother give his new friend a name. As the scientist turns his back, the creature holds the cat, trying to think of something cool. Focused on his somber research, the man walks down a dark and silent corridor. Back in the present, the villain discovers that the agents destroyed his magma monster. But he encounters a new aberration trapped in a tube, and warns that the deaths don't matter. The green and terrifying creature struggles furiously inside the tank of magical liquid. Adjusting his glasses, the scientist maliciously declares that the end of that world is near. Meanwhile, the sunset calmly illuminates the buildings of the big city. At school, Ryudo runs through the hallways looking at the coordinates of the next mission on his cell phone. In a great hurry, the protagonist flees the classroom wanting to avoid his friends. Suddenly, Ren yells for him to wait, forcing the boy to brake sharply. The blonde boy and Racuna stare at the boy, asking why he's always rushing around so much every day. Sweating profusely, the young man invents yet another lame excuse about a video game event. He runs off again in desperation, promising to explain everything to the pair the next day. Watching them escape, the girl sadly grumbles that her friend has been ignoring them frequently. At that point, the young woman turns her face, drawing her colleague's attention to an old conversation. Confused, the blonde boy asks what exactly she's talking about, and the girl mentions the hospital. A memory of the boy returning home resurfaces, asking if the girl knows about the freaks. In the memory, the colleague reveals that he once saved a monster girl when he was a child. Hearing that crazy confession leaves her friend completely paralyzed with surprise. Currently, the girl demands to know the whole story and accuses the two of hiding the truth. Pressed, the blonde man raises his hands, stammering and trying to hide his nervousness. Quite irritated, the girl complains that she feels totally excluded by the two boys. Ren panics, trying to calm his colleague and assuring her that it's nothing like that. Losing patience, Racuna turns her back, determined to discover the secret on her own. She runs furiously down the school hallway, ignoring the blonde boy's desperate calls. Alone in the room, the boy lowers his hand, sighing in frustration at having annoyed his friend. The protagonist waits in a dark alley, calmly checking his cell phone. The rookie is puzzled by Instructor Rose's delay, but confirms he is in the correct area. Suddenly, a terrified male scream tears through the silence, startling the boy instantly. Without wasting any time, he dashes swiftly down the street, trying to locate the source of the despair. On the alley floor, a man cries for help as he is attacked by a mummified abomination. Ryudo freezes in a completely shocked state upon recognizing the enemy from previous battles. Arriving breathless on the street, Ryudo shouts, ordering the mummified monster to stop the attack. Recognizing the boy, the beast retreats while the civilian, in panic, pleads for help. Suddenly, a group of blue monsters appears, and the mummy complains that they plan to devour her. The protagonist's eyes widen, taking in the gravity of the new threat in that alley. The shadowy creatures advance in a coordinated manner, prepared to attack whoever is in front of them. Taking advantage of the chaos, the mummy cowardly flees, warning that he will leave the rest to the boy. Alone, the boy curses in frustration as he watches the horde surround the entire perimeter of the area. He quickly realizes that those bizarre monsters come directly from the nocturnal realm. Assuming a firm stance, the young man's gaze reflects an unwavering determination for the confrontation. Without hesitation, he invokes the magic of transposition on the path, aiming to banish all enemies there. The aberrations unleash menacing roars against the lone newcomer. Swiftly, the protagonist unleashes his powerful dark energy from his own hand. With a swift attack, its dark blade slices through several beasts at once in a devastating blow. A monster tries to escape by running, but the boy firmly declares that there will be no escape. Suddenly, the runaway freak is cut from behind, the victim of a deadly surprise attack. Finishing the move, Ryudo tears apart the nearest enemy, splattering a lot of blood. Out of the corner of his eye, he notices another creature being silently slaughtered at the end of the dark street. The boy turns his face, quite surprised, trying to understand who executed that precise blow. Leaping from the rooftops, Hakua plummets onto the battlefield, striking the monsters squarely. With extreme agility, the warrior slices through the blue beast without showing the slightest effort. Relieved by the arrival of the providential reinforcement, the protagonist calls out his companion's name. As he thanks her for her help, he hears the young woman warn him never to let his guard down during the fight. Concerned, the boy asks if his friend is fully capable of fighting so intensely. Maintaining her composure, the doppelganger assures everyone that she is now 100% recovered. She smiles, commenting that their performance is superior together, and her colleague immediately agrees. Far away, Racuna walks alone through an alley bathed in the orange light of twilight. Observing the landscape, the girl recognizes the street, confirming that it is the exact location. A memory hits her. It was there that she found little Ryudo abandoned in the distant past. Connecting the dots, she concludes without a shadow of a doubt that the story of the game was nothing but a lie. Wandering through the area, he wonders about his friend's whereabouts and what mysteries he now hides. Suddenly, Racuna hears a faint meow and wonders if there's a cat nearby. The spotted animal appears meowing sweetly, charmingly surprising the young woman. Though with great affection, the little feline rubs against her legs, demanding some affection. She bends down, asking gently what happened and if the kitten got lost there. Upon noticing the collar around the animal's neck, he realizes that it actually already has an owner. Unexpectedly, the cat darts off down the alley, while the young woman tries to call it back. Worried, the girl follows the animal through the narrow streets, asking it to wait a moment. Losing the trail, she breaks in the middle of the dark alley, searching the area for the fugitive. Suddenly, the roar of a violent attack startles the student, sending a chill down her spine. Fixing his gaze on the corner, Racuna tries to decipher the origin of that brutal sound. Her eyes widen, paralyzed and horrified by the grotesque scene unfolding just ahead. Instructor Rose slices an abomination in half, splattering the beast's blood across the walls. Irritated with the work, the veteran grumbles that he doesn't have time for those creatures. Checking his cell phone, the executive notices a message confirming that Hakua has located the boy. Hidden, the young woman covers her mouth, terrified and unable to comprehend what kind of monster that man is. Ryudo checks his phone, feeling relieved to know that his master has completed the task. Walking beside him, the warrior suggests they have dinner together, since the mission is over. Excited by the unexpected invitation, the boy smiles broadly, agreeing with the excellent idea. Strolling through the neighborhood, she ponders what to eat, while he calmly accompanies her. Inside a rustic restaurant, the boy is shocked by the existence of that place. Hakor reveals that the owner is a giant pigeon, leaving his partner completely incredulous. Seated at the table, the girl voraciously savors her generous slice of freshly served pizza. With an excited smile, he praises the perfect blend of melted cheese over the hot dough. Noticing her colleague's fixed gaze, she hesitates for a moment and asks if she said something strange. The boy confesses that he simply didn't imagine his partner enjoying such an everyday dish. Immediately afterwards, he asks curiously if she has such a great fondness for cheese. Confirming with joy, she hears the boy comment that Racuna is also passionate about it. Upon hearing about the human, the warrior displays a melancholy smile, hidden by her mask. Breaking the silence, Ryudo asks why she doesn't remove the blindfold even to eat. He regrets his intrusion and hastily apologizes for the impolite question. He reflects that aberrations conceal their features in order to circulate freely in the human world. However, being a doppelganger who already resembles humans, he does not understand such a disguise. Facing her ally, she suggests that she uses the mask to hide from the obsessed scientist. Hakoa confirms the theory, but strongly warns that this is not the only purpose of the protection. Reveals that the lethal curse is activated when the copies encounter their original counterparts. She details that the effect is triggered the moment one recognizes the other's features. Therefore, the young woman hides her eyes, seeking to minimize the risk of harming her human counterpart. Pointing to the fabric, he declares that the mask also represents his strict duty as an agent. Clenched fist, he vows to protect the innocent to repay his debt to his past savior. Ryudo listens to his companion's words, feeling immense admiration for her undeniable nobility. Watching her drink peacefully, he secretly decides that he will never hide his own secrets from her again. Meanwhile, Racuna remains huddled in the street, paralyzed by the sight of the massacre on the corner. Suddenly, Rose turns her face, casting a suspicious glance as she detects a presence in the shadows. Pointing towards the alley, the executive claims to have noticed the spy, demanding that he come out. The girl gasps, terrified as she realizes that the dangerous individual had exposed her hiding place. Emerged from the shadows, Racuna appears sweating profusely and apologizing, denying any spying intentions. The instructor assesses her with his gaze and calmly concludes that she is just an ordinary human. Turning around, he warns that the alley is a dangerous place to wander, ordering him to return home. Soon, the executive walks away, while the young woman hesitates, trying to call him again. Completely confused, the student gathers her courage and questions the man's true identity. Slowing her pace, Rose warns earnestly that curiosity has limits, and crossing them is lethal. With a predatory gaze, the veteran assures that further investigation will only lead to his death. Faced with a direct threat, Racuna is paralyzed with terror, unable to utter another word. However, stubbornness prevails. She runs down the alley begging the mysterious figure to wait a moment. Upon reaching the empty corner, the student stops, frustrated and breathless, seeing that the man has vanished. Exhausted, the girl lowers her head, deeply regretting her failure to get answers about her friend. Clutching her own skirt tightly, she refuses to give up, trying to piece together the few clues she has obtained. Ryudo's memory resurfaces, confirming the existence of aberrations and his direct involvement. She deduces that her friend and that man are hiding a vast secret. Suddenly, a meow erupts. Relieving the tension, she gently bends down, recognizing the runaway kitten from moments ago. Smiling sweetly, she offers a treat in her hand, asking if the animal is very hungry. Distracted while searching for food, she doesn't even notice the gigantic shadow rising behind her. A colossal aberration stealthily emerges and announces, in a deep voice, that it has finally found her. Raccoon freezes before the oppressive aura and turns her face away, terrified before the monstrous enemy. Near its prey, the grotesque creature grumbles in confusion upon noticing a strange detail on its target. The monster hesitates for a few seconds, analyzing the girl's features to confirm a bizarre suspicion. Far away, the scene focuses on Ryudo, who displays an expression of utter astonishment as he faces his ally. Without the mask, Hakua is the spitting image of his human friend, causing him to murmur her name in shock. Back in the alley, the beast, astonished by the terrified student, asks if she is the traitor Hakua.